due to devastating floods and rains. This was unprecedented. So how are we building towards the themes? One of the key messages of this forum is one planet, one Pakistan. But it's really important to continue putting our force behind these things. And especially because the last year has not just found us impacted and vulnerable in terms of the forces of nature and the climate, but also we've found ourselves to be very fragile when it comes to our economy. And usually, as the world would tell you, as many economic pundits would tell you, when it comes to the dollars and cents and livelihoods and actual jobs, sometimes the climate impact and our carbon footprint somehow takes a backseat. But we would not want that to happen. We have to continue moving towards a future where we are building something and leaving something beautiful for our generations to come. So ladies and gentlemen, let's build upon the learnings from last year. And let's also look at what have been some of the wonderful milestones that we have achieved. We made pledges, we made commitments. How are we doing in terms of that? How are we moving towards them? So today we'll have deliberations on subjects relating to these themes. But first and foremost, may I take this opportunity of someone who really champions the cause with a lot of passion when it comes to ESG, when it comes to diversity, and more importantly, when it comes to impact. He's really been a force to reckon with. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming for his welcome address, the President of OICCI, Mr. Amir Paracha.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone, and a very warm welcome to the second Pakistan Climate Conference. Thank you, Sidra, for setting the context. I must say it's a very buzzing morning, particularly on a subject which has never been so exciting to most of the crowd. Who would have expected that there's going to be a hall full, and I think so we have an auditorium full downstairs as well, to attend and discuss about the climate changes in the country. I understand there's a great lineup of experts. From the policy, from the corporate sector, from the government sector, from the ministry, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of learning coming together. Today I would like to basically start off a bit of a provocative kind of the day. And I would like to basically start off by telling that, I think the Pakistan climate story is a story of paradox. And I'll try building why it's a story of paradox. This is a chart since 1800, and you see a direct correlation between the GDP growth and the carbon emission. The more you grow, the more the carbon you emit in the atmosphere. And that's been our story. And that's the reason we are where we are. Today, the world is melting. The temperature is going up. And as responsible corporate citizens, we need to also realize that if we really want to grow our businesses, it cannot come at the cost of climate anymore. It has come at the cost of climate, and I think so today we are paying the cost. We have paid a very heavy price last year during floods of 2022. And I think so as the world is coming to realization that they have to decouple the growth with the carbon emission. I think so we have to find ways to grow through using the renewable energy rather through emitting carbon in the atmosphere. This is an interesting chart. It's a heat map being put by Adam Simpson, and you'll see there are 4 lit up spots on this heat map. One is, you'll notice it's US, the second is Europe, the third is China, the fourth is India, followed by South Africa and South America. And what he has done, that he's also kind of plotted flight paths, shipping lanes, and high production areas. And this shows the carbon emission across the world being emitted by 4 key countries. 52% of the carbon emission is happening by 3 countries, which is India, China, and US. Annually, we emit around 34 billion tons of carbon dioxide in the air globally. And I think so that's a moment of realization for all of us. But let me try building my story. So, just hold these numbers here. In all these charts, you'll find Pakistan won't appear. There's South America, there's Brazil, there's US, there's India, there's China, there are a lot of European countries like Germany, Italy. But you will not find Pakistan on these charts. Or if they are, they're very small. This is another chart which is the plastic waste. There's an annual 350 million tons of plastic waste. A fraction of it is recycled, and mostly 90% is actually go into mismanaged waste that go into a landfill, or it goes into the marine life, completely destroying the whole marine system and the land system. Particularly in Pakistan, any plastic wastage in the country impacts the soil and the entire ecosystem for the country. And again, it's the same usual suspects. It's India, it's China, it's US, it's Philippines as well, by the way. Around 37% of the world plastic wastage is coming from Philippines. But it's not all originated from Philippines. By virtue of their geographic location, most of the plastic through ocean get actually collected at the coastline of Philippines. Also, lots of dumping is taking place in Philippines. Last year alone, Philippines shipped back 69 containers of mismanaged plastic waste back to Canada. So it's predominantly coming from the developed countries into the Asian countries. And Asian countries are one which are not really prepared. Now let me change gears. This is, again, a heat map. And let me explain how to read it. On an extreme left, it's the air quality index. On the extreme left, you'll find Canberra. It has the best air quality in the world. On your extreme left, it's going to be your right, my left. You'll find Delhi. And by the way, last week, Lahore topped Delhi when it comes to the poor air quality index. So you can imagine that today, out of top 50 countries in the world, Lahore is the worst air quality index. So this can give you a sense what's happening. And this is being plotted by which we call PM 2.5, which is particulate matter, fine particulate matters. It's a 2.5 diameter. It's 28 times smaller than the hair strand. It's made out of combustion and metals. And what we are today actually inhaling, it's actually combustion material and metal. And imagine the kind of combustion material and metal we are actually inhaling every single moment in our country. This is another chart, and you'll find again Pakistan on the chart. It's about the state of global water security in the world. And you'll find there are 4 actually segments. There are water secure countries, there are moderately secure countries, there are water insecure countries, and there are critically insecure water countries. You will find only 2 countries in the world which are critically water insecure. It happens to be Pakistan and Ethiopia. So in the previous chart, I've shown Pakistan has the worst air quality. In the second chart, I've shown Pakistan is actually, out of 2 countries, which is Pakistan and Ethiopia, has the most insecure water system because of the increasing population, because of the poor infrastructure, because of the declining freshwater system, because of the poor governance. But this is the state. And the third one is the countries which can be most impacted by floods. And again, you'll find Pakistan the 5th country in the world. And we have experienced this firsthand last year. So what's I'm trying to say? The paradox. The paradox is that we are nowhere when it comes to emission, but when it comes to impact and vulnerability, we are the 5th most vulnerable country in the world. Now that's a paradox. The problem is that out of 3 countries which basically emit more than 50% of the carbon in the air, we share border with 2 countries, India and China. Now, this is my last slide, and I would like to basically leave it here for the rest of the day. The dialogue has to be on 2 fronts. One is that as responsible citizens and as members of the private sector, what we need to do in order to basically honor our NDCs, which we basically committed back in 2015 at Paris Agreement, COP26, which is that we need to reduce our potential emission by 50% by 2030, and also we need to introduce 30% hybrid vehicles. And we all need to work in order to basically move from the fossil fuel-based energy to green energy. But the second bit is, which is again very important, I don't think so there's much work happening, and it's more to do with the Ministry of Climate Change and policymakers, that we need to start advocacy. We need to start advocacy with the different countries. And Europe has actually started a concept called CBAM, which is called Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So any carbon leakage that is happening from your neighboring country, there has to be a fair price put on this. And you actually charge for this because that's not your doing. And we all know in order to basically prepare ourselves, the price tag, at least in 2015, was $50 billion for Pakistan to create moats, to have canals, to have water system in order to prepare ourselves for any imminent threat that may basically Mother Nature can bring on us. So we need to, on one side, we need to start advocacy. On the other side, we need to start basically have our own internal organization working towards moving towards green energy. This is the funding given by UN to different countries to prepare themselves for any kind of a calamity. And this is funding is given by United Nations Framework Convention of Climate. It's called UNCCC. It allocates resources to low emission and climate resilient projects. The question is, Pakistan is nowhere on the list. The question is, Pakistan is the most vulnerable country. The question is, Pakistan is not actually in the top 20 countries when it comes to emission. The question is that we really need to ask UN and the countries which are more responsible to actually pay for the carbon leakage into our environment so we prepare ourselves from any imminent threat that can come through any natural disaster. And yes, in parallel, we continue to work towards the NDCs we committed. And that's a paradox. And I think so we need to basically manage this paradox because eventually it's us who get impacted. We must not get into a blame game, but we have to actually have a dialogue on both the fronts. Thank you, and wish you a great day today, and looking forward to some exciting outcome by the day end. Thank you, and Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Amir. And indeed, when it comes to an understanding and our response to climate impact, we find a wide diversity of reactions and responses. And every stakeholder might turn around and identify for you the reasons why they aren't able to do more. But sometimes it's sheer ignorance. When we look at the biggest emitters of the world and the people who have the resources to perhaps change behaviors, change the way business is done, there seems to be a gap. And I can quote for you a first-hand example. This summer, I was actually in Canada for the Commonwealth Study Conference. And the province that we were doing a deep, thorough tour of and visiting the companies over there was Alberta. This is home to one of the biggest oil and energy companies of the world. And for some odd reason, in those conference halls, the conversation and the quote, and the statement that was being made each time was, when the last barrel of oil will be, drilled out of the ground, we want that to be Canada. And I leave that to your discretion, how to actually, make sense of it. Initially, I thought maybe they're going to make the standards so stringent, they were going to make the protocol so strict that it has to be clean and it will only be, Canada or countries which have the resources in place to make it so strict. But later on, as the tour continued, I realized that they're absolutely dismissive about climate impact. They think the business is going to go on as usual. Of course, there were carbon emissions. When you ask them about what's being done about it, there's carbon capture. But then what do you do with the capture? Or we put it back in the ground. I don't know how that is a solution. Very recently, I came across this really interesting saying, and I thought I'm going to say it out in the context. They said there's a fundamental rule of the universe, of the ecosystem that we are a part of, that every species and every living being only takes what is required. You see that in the birds, you see that in the most mammoth beasts, you also see that in plantation. The tree will only take the nutrients that it most requires from the earth. But there is only one species that breaks that rule every day of every week, of every month, of every year. And that is us humans. It is our greed. We always want more. We may call this the age of abundance, but abundance at the cost of what? हमने हमेशा वो फेबल सुना है कि जो सोने की अंडा देने वाली मुर्गी होती है उसको आप एक दिन में ज़िबा नहीं करते. But that's the mindset humans have had. We want it all, we want more, and we want it now. And that cannot continue. But ladies and gentlemen, to set the stage for this year's climate conference, as all stakeholders in Pakistan are not going to just indulge in blame shifting, as Amir has said, but we are going to look at measures that you and I can do and build towards. So we're just not going for the lowest hanging fruit, but we are actually bringing some more rhythm and thought to it of how we can continue building on it 2030 and beyond. And what are some of the milestones and targets we set for ourselves. So ladies and gentlemen, for the context setting for the second Pakistan Climate Conference 2023, please join me in welcoming the co-chair of OICCI ESG Subcommittee, Mr. Andrew Bailey.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just before I start, I'd just like to, a couple of housekeeping announcements. In terms of safety, fire escapes, there is one to the right through the catering hall and down the stairs, and the second one is as you came in, out through the left-hand side or your right-hand side, out, and we'll gather at the front of the building. Secondly, just in terms of bathrooms, there is the ladies on this side and the gents is at the back through the door. It is well announced. There is an ambulance and we do have a doctor on site as well. And there are no fire drills planned for today. All right. So the OICCI is very proud to be hosting our second climate conference. The Chamber is aiming to leverage the expertise of global and local business leaders, climate experts, climate enthusiasts, the media, public authorities, and OICC members for the benefit of Pakistan on the critical topic of climate change, recognizing the joint responsibility that is required. Like last year's conference, we were joined this year by some renowned speakers who are thought leaders in their field. With 9 keynote speakers, 23 panelists in 5 different panels, A number of topics are going to be raised, as we'll see shortly. But we're thrilled. We have over 200 participants in our conference today, representing over 80 organizations, half of which is from OICCI. We will be having 3 engagement activities, from the pledge wall to calculating your carbon footprint, as well as generating a little bit of energy to mitigate climate change. We'll be hearing a little bit more from that. But I think one of the proudest parts to this conference is that we will be calculating what our emissions are, and we will be looking to offset them in the coming months once we've done that calculation. So our 5 main themes for today's conference is going to be building on the learnings from last year's conference, as well as from COP27 held in Egypt in November of last year, with the objective to identify and recommend efforts needed to address climate change and to reduce the impact in Pakistan. It will also closely follow the COP28 agenda, which is going to be held later this month in the UAE. We adopt a science and a fact-based approach to climate change, which has the required and urgent necessity for public-private partnership to address probably humanity's greatest issue facing us today. Whilst the conference will be focused on 5 main themes, the role of IT, technology, the use of data, and gender equality will be overarching in all these 5 themes. We saw a number of the impacts in Amar's presentation. The first topic is really around climate resilience and capacity buildings. Pakistan is at the forefront of climate-induced vulnerabilities, with German Watch ranking Pakistan as the 8th most vulnerable country. This is reflected very clearly in a recent study by McKinsey in 2022, which compares the wealth of nations against the transition they face with climate change. What is striking? At the bottom right is your stable, wealthy, resilient countries, and in the top we see the emerging markets and the most vulnerable. And there, right at the very top, we see Pakistan. According to UNICEF, 33 million people were affected last year with the floods. Half of them were children, and most of them are still facing the issue today. Therefore, we believe resilience and capacity building is an important challenge, an important topic that we have to address. The second topic is plastic and waste management. Plastic pollution and climate change are not separate topics. They are intertwined and are mutually detrimental to each other. According to UNDP, Pakistan generates approximately 20 million tons of solid waste, of which 5 to 10 is plastic waste, and much of that ends up in the ocean. The panel will also discuss the recent current legislation banning single-use plastics in Punjab and Islamabad, but also the status of the recycling market in Pakistan, the infrastructure hurdles that need to be addressed, so the need for circularity is priority. The third topic is emission reductions and clean energy. Over half of the cumulative global CO2 emissions that have taken place have happened since 1990, according to the Institute of European Environmental Policy. To put this into context, this is the time period that I have been living my life, working, looking after my family, and I guess many people in this room. This is our problem. This is our problem that we've created, and this is our problem we need to solve. Limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, required by the Paris Agreement, requires transforming all systems of how we power our economy, how we build our cities, and how we feed our growing population. But these transformations are not occurring nearly fast enough. Pakistan's nationally determined contributions, a cornerstone of the Paris Agreement, aims to reduce emissions by 50% by 2030, using 2015 as a base. This will be achieved through a shift to 60% renewable energy supply and 30% vehicle sales coming from electric vehicles by 2030. Panels will highlight the contribution and progress made by the private sector in shifting the energy demand and supply to renewable energy, and what is the future potential and challenges faced by the private sector in this journey. The fourth topic is towards green financing and carbon credits. To achieve net zero, there's definitely a cost to this climate change to addressing it. And to achieve it, Pakistan needs to spend upwards of $70 billion per year to achieve this net zero. Now, where is this money going to come from? The panel will be looking at how this can be achieved through the use of, for instance, carbon credits, but also how this can be achieved from those developed, wealthy, stable countries at the bottom of the graph. The presenters will also talk about the role of financial institutions in terms of arranging capital for these essential climate projects. The fifth and the last topic is ESG governance and reporting. Annual capital inflow in global sustainable funds increased by 66% during the period 2017 to 2021. The International Sustainability Standard Board has issued new sustainability reporting, IFRS S1 and S2. ICAP, PSX and SEP, who will be talking later on today, they are also working on these ESG compliance mechanisms. Therefore, we'd like to learn on the global best practices in terms of reporting, how we can learn from this, and how we can comply to attract this funding. But a conference like this would not be possible without our valued sponsors. Our platinum sponsors, Chevron, Dorlands, Infrazaman, Standard Chartered and Unilever, gold sponsor BASF, and our silver sponsors, Abbott, Nestle and Toyota. Thank you very much for the part that you've played today and for the part that you are playing in Pakistan. I would also like to thank the OICCI for this great initiative, but also to my organizing team. They've done a fantastic job to put this together, and I know it's going to be a successful conference. In closing, in the words of Nelson Mandela, who led the country that I came from, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Now, I would suggest that addressing climate change, there are times that we have to go alone, but it is imperative that we go together. With this in mind, and by the end of today, I trust you will leave the conference with fresh insights, learnings, inspirations, as well as a resolve and a commitment to make a positive impact in the world. As an individual, with your family, within your community, within your company, and as a country for Pakistan. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Andrew. May I request our organizing team to kindly facilitate setting up a stage for the panel discussion, and we'll need the mics to come along with that as well, please. May I request the setting up to happen so that I can start inviting my panelists. Thank you, Andrew, once again for bringing our focus back to that, to community. There is that famous, concept of Ubuntu, which primarily means I am because we are. And if you look at these challenges, the only way possible to find a solution is when you start seeing humanity as one seamless community. When you stop blaming, when you stop dividing. Of course, the onus of it is all on us. The resources are not equal, but then again, the will and the passion to do something has to be universal in order to solve this issue. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to dive right into the conversation that Andrew has outlined for us. The first panel that we are going to go for is talking about climate resilience and capacity building in vulnerable communities. Now, Pakistan has a double whammy. Not only are we most vulnerable when it comes to climate change and impact, but we are also meager in our resources. And of course, complicating our situation is our political uncertainty and a number of other issues. Very recently, I picked up Harari's book, Homo Deus, and he speaks about how in the 21st century, the Homo sapiens are going to move towards being, an idealistic, larger-than-life goal of being Homo Deus, when humans will perhaps start acting like God. And what he bases his hypothesis in is because famine, disease, and conflict may be a thing of the past. Now, when we don't actively think about it, what are we going to direct our energies towards? And there's something about ambition, because as soon as you're going to get one goal, it doesn't damper you. You want to do more. And therefore, he thinks that climate impact, making this planet beautiful, from preserving life to creating artificial life, is some of the humanity's goals. But in the last few weeks, we have once again been reminded. In fact, in the last couple of years, we've had COVID make a comeback. We've had climate impact once again threatening to bring in food insecurity and famines. And of course, we've also seen the Ukraine and other conflicts rise up in the world, which tell us that it's not perhaps going to be a thing of the past. So how do we bring climate resilience to center stage? Our panel is just going to discuss that. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by introducing this wonderful panel to you. Joining us online is the Executive Director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute, that is the SDPI. He's a leading expert on sustainable development, poverty alleviation, food security, and climate change. He's served in various national and regional policy-making forums and has represented Pakistan at a variety of international forums. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please join us. Joining us today is Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri. He's connected to us online, and you'll be able to see him shortly there soon. I am wondering what will be our modus operandi when it comes to the mics, because I don't see them here. So we'll probably have handhelds there. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, is a former mayor of Karachi. He's also been the administrator Karachi and is currently working with Dawn Media Group. He regularly writes about climate change, relief, and rehabilitation, and is well versed in the policy framework around it. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Fahim Zaman Khan. Gentlemen, how would you want my panelists to be seated? I'm so sorry, we're just trying to figure this one out. This is a visual representation of when you do something for the first time. Even when it comes to climate impact or conferences, it takes a little bit of adjustment. So thank you for being patient with us. I do believe that the last one will have our, so this leaves a little room for creativity as well. You guys can also send us your suggestions. For the next panel discussions, we'll keep moving it around. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming an architect par excellence, a researcher whose practices combines visual culture, spatial advocacy, and interventions. She serves on several advisory boards in the government and the non-profit organizations. Please welcome Ms. Marvi Mazhar. Thank you, Marvi. Ladies and gentlemen, a climate change specialist focusing on low carbon and resilient development, international climate finance, and just transition just transition for an equitable world. Currently, he's serving as the Climate Change Senior Advisor at the World Bank, is a member of the Pakistan Climate Change Council chaired by the Prime Minister, and serves on the board of several non-profit and private sector organizations. Please welcome Mr. Ali Tawqir Sheikh. Is Ali Saab joining us online as well? Next up, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the current Chief Executive Officer of Sinha Healthcare Trust, which has grown under the stewardship, her stewardship from 750,000 patients annually to about 1.2 million in a span of 1 year. She embodies leadership in delivering innovative solutions. Please welcome Amreen Kazim Thompson. May I request for another handheld mic? Yes, for our panelists. Can we also have our online panelists can we do an audio check for them if we have Dr. Abid Suleri Sahab and probably Ali Tawqir also online with us? So I'll need one more mic, please.
Thank you. And as we wait for our panelists, the other panelists to join us online, let's begin with the ones we have in person over here. Fahim Saab, if I may begin with you, the policy making framework, your job, the job you formerly had, the office that you had has not become any easier, but the population in Karachi has grown many-fold. So what would you say is the space a policy maker, an administrator has when it comes to developing climate resilience for a metropolis, for a big city like Karachi?
I was once interviewed by a French television crew, and they started discussing, and they wanted to talk about the violence going on in those days. I'm talking about 94, 96. And by that time, I was through with explaining situation of Karachi. He felt so sorry for me, and he said, "Do you think there is any other person in this city who is doing a much sadder job than yours?" I said, "The guy who is going to be in this chair 25 years from now." So Karachi, a city that started as a city of 400,000 people, today we do not actually have a count. I really contest the figures posted by Pakistan Bureau of Statistics for the 2017 census, but still, there are many things the city can do. Let me give you an example of the Landi cattle colony. It's considered to be one of the largest cattle colonies in the world. It's probably set up in 1958 at 750 acres. Today is more than almost like 2,000 acres. We generate tons and tons of cattle colony waste every day, and 99% of that goes untreated into the Gizri Creek. That waste, including the cow dung and the blood and anything else, can generate easily about 100 tons of bio-LNG. I met about 8 years back a gentleman from UK, and he had been in Karachi for almost 2 years trying to convert that waste into electricity. Finally failed and left the country. I told him I started something similar back in 94, 95. I failed and I continue to fail. So it's basically not about what we can do. It's more about failure of our governance, our policies, and our attitude towards the city in general.
Thank you, Fahim Saab, for that. I'll just quickly do an audio check of my panelists who are joining us online. if I may begin with Dr. Abid, are we audible to you? And if you could kindly do a sound check. I believe you're on mute and we can't hear you. Yeah, we can see you wave, but I can't hear you. Okay, so we'll try and fix that. Let me try with Ali Saab. Mr. Ali Takir, are we audible to you? Can you hear me, Ali Saab? Ali Saab, can you hear me? Okay, you can perhaps hear us, but you're freezing and not audible. So I'm going to come back to them in a bit. Marby, if I may take this one to you. When we talk about climate vulnerability, just last June we had the devastating floods. There was a lot of movement of climate refugees. This is just not people who are affected by floods, but also in the northern areas where devastation is making many of the villages to be unlivable. What's the response of the local communities apart from the governance challenges that Fahim Saab has identified?
Thank you so much. You can hear me, right? It's clear. So before I begin with that answer, I have to make a disclaimer. I've come here with a huge, in the beginning there was a conversation on responsibility, and I'm here with a very conscious notion that doing a continuing advocacy in the city, I carry a huge responsibility. All the brand names are large stakeholders in creating problems. And for me to be here, I'm representing a group of activists who are very upset that I'm here. But I am a voice for them right now, and I need to bring that out into this white stage to tell you that the query that you had, that displacement doesn't come just because of a disaster. It comes through momentum of a long-term commitment of disaster. It's not one time. It's been happening, this violence has been taking place for many, many years. And unfortunately, governance and policy are a marriage together, which is a collapsed institution, which has not served the global south. It hasn't served the pragmatics of designing. And I'm here with that voice to tell you that just by creating a first aid mechanism will not help in repair. What we need to do at the moment, what you said about the community and the repercussion of today from what happened last year, is that we haven't come up with a solution which serves the purpose. We work on absolute notion of first aid mechanisms. We're always working on emergency. We never invest in research. We never invest in institutionalizing labs where you become part of creating some kind of silos which creates an ideology. We don't invest in ideology. We invest in pragmatics of how we can fix now. And that is the problem. So in terms of community rebuilding, what happened was that the material that was introduced was adding onto carbon. Again, introducing concrete, steel, structures, prefab. The ecological care did not exist in this first aid mechanism. And plus the kind of introduction that was given, the new materiality that was given, was too alien for the people of that context. The context was a regional which believed in the local material, which was more about lime, tuna, mud, investment of creating that material into something which is more solidified. But what we were giving them was fast solution. And that is the problem. So coming from a failed governance policy making, there's a failed mechanism of solution-based ideologies.
You're absolutely spot on with that. Just last month, I was in Gilgit-Baltistan, and there's a term for it. Gilgit's, the tourism industry over there has readily started to call it the murification of GB, because you have so many of these ugly concrete structures come in. But do you feel that the lacunas, and I sense that angst and disappointment in your voice when you say that there is a group of advocates who are very unhappy. Where do they see the gap? Who do they see at fault?
Yeah, so of course, the corporate corporatization of everything is the main problem, and we all acknowledge that. And it's not, I'm an architect, I've practiced in the commercial, residential aspects, I am part of the capitalistic pursuits. But at the same time, there's a lot of momentum that is given towards research and awareness. Advocacy cannot be corporatized. Advocacy is a standalone substance where there's a pushback. If there is no pushback, there is nothing. You cannot have a dialogue. So the pushback cannot be branded. Awareness education can. That can become part of your root mechanisms. Now, coming to what happens in the north, this is all fast solutions, fast tourism. When the last year's government promoted 1 billion tree mechanisms, where is the analysis and the study, what happened to it? I, fortunately or unfortunately, was working in the north at that time, and I was doing a design project. None of the people, they all were given alien trees to be grown into the context which did not see that evergreen trees. So there was no educational purpose mechanism where you knew that you are planting something which is us dharti ki, us zameen ki. Everything was an alien. So what we are doing in construction, we are also giving part and parcel IKEA systems. Here, this is your package, go build it 8 by 12. Same way, 1 billion tree mechanism was, ये ले दरख्त के पौधे, ये बच्चे हैं, इनको जाके पालिए. और वो वहाँ नहीं हुए. तो कोई उसके बाद, there were no analysis done after, कि what happened to the billion tree study. Now there's a new phenomena, urban forests. Everybody, every cement factory wants to have a backyard of a urban forest. Great, some are doing amazing. I've seen some really productive mechanism. But how do you incorporate that? My critique is not to dismay the urban forest. My critique is how do you bring the urban forest as part of your master plan? How does that marry your larger outline? How does that work with the governance? Is the local government part of that infrastructure? Does the government know that what are you doing in that urban forest? What kind of emission or what kind of positive air quality is it creating in your Char Diwari? So, neighborhood, now that's a whole different conversation which I will drive into, but I don't want to swift into it. But what I want to conclude is, ripple effect only takes place when your boundary wall is shared in a mechanism where it's not about two walls, it's about one shared wall. And what happens between those two houses is an external manufacturing of conversation.
I want to bring this one to Amreen and want to sort of close the loop on food security and health issues. We see a lot of displacements that Marvi has alluded to. We had the internal conflict resolution, the operations that were happening in the north. So in the last 15 years, we saw a lot of people from the northmost areas of Pakistan coming to find a better life in the urban areas. There's been fast urbanization as well. How has that added to the healthcare pressures? You know, when you say that Sena was previously looking at 75,000 people or 750,000 people, and now the people you cater to has gone up to 1.2, how 1.5 million? How, how do you make sense of it?
So, thank you, Sidra. So, I'm just going to say a couple of quick things on this. We all know climate change is going to impact both health and food security. What both Waheem and Marvi have alluded to, I will say the same thing. Pakistan suffers, the biggest problem it has is it suffers from planning and governance. Okay, at every forum, our government talks about the fact that we have a very young population, and that's the strength of Pakistan. But is it really the strength of Pakistan? You have 40% stunting in Pakistan, 17% severe stunting. So you're talking about a generation of people who will be a burden on Pakistan. They are not going to be. What this recent climate change, and the climate change, as Marvi said, is not just this. इससे पहले भी floods आपके यहाँ आते रहते हैं वगैरह. You have just these current floods have pushed an estimated 40 million additional people below the poverty line. The poverty line के below जा रहे हैं because of climatic changes, health, food insecurity, long-term economic output, all of this is being is obviously impacted. What Piracha Saab said, he used the word paradox. Well, there is a paradox with climate change also. Aapki flooding jo hoti hai, yes, last year we had massive floods, but look at the crop output this year. You actually have bumper crops coming out. So, you know, so it's about planning. There was a project I'd studied, the Balochistan 100 dam project. We never did make those 100 dams. But by building small dams instead of these big, huge dams that take years and years, you know, that's one way of mitigating both the food insecurity, using the environmental, you know, the floods to our advantage. What we were talking about, कि जो $50 billion हमें मिलने चाहिए. Yes, this water should be raising our water table. It should be reinvigorating our water channels. But it's not, because we're not diverting the water. The water just stands there. WHO is conducting a survey. This is going to be a very painful. 95 जगह पे उन्होंने जो survey किया है, in 75% of those places they feel कि the water going below the earth, जो floods में water खड़ा रहा है, that will destroy further the water table, because इतनी आपके यहाँ chemical pollution है in the earth that water will take all that down. And in 5 places they have even found radioactivity in Karachi's water. So
That's alarming. But I want to go back to the floods of 2022. We heard that there were about more than 50,000, some report even claimed 100,000 women who were expecting to give birth, and they were pregnant as they were displaced. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I kept looking for numbers. We had no details about how many children have been displaced by these floods. What are their nutritional needs like? We had these harrowing reports come out where they were eating perhaps just, you know, potatoes all week long. So of course the nutrition is getting impacted. But any updates on the women and the children who were displaced?
Again, the most vulnerable are the women and children. And yes, we did hear about the 100,000 women. Unfortunately, giving एक तो सबसे बड़ी problem पाकिस्तान की है ना कि unchecked population growth है. So the 100,000 women that gave birth probably gave birth at the back of in a field. There are 3 refugee camps just on the outskirts of Karachi. A lot of women turned up there. We had an influx of both local and international organizations that helped them through this. But as Marvi said, these are all band-aids. These are not, you know, long-term solutions. Of the 250 to 300,000 people that were displaced and turned up in Karachi, more than 100,000 of them have never gone back.
Okay.
They're still sitting in camps.
So this is the magnitude of the problem that we are facing, and this is just perhaps the tip of the iceberg. Let's go to our 2 policy influencers who are at the heart of Islamabad, and let's find out if there has been any capacity building, some good news that we can share at this forum. So if I may take this to Ali Tawqir Saab. Are we audible? Okay, so, or maybe Abid Saab, either one of them, whoever can hear me first and can have a go at it. Abid Saab, am I audible to you? Is Abid Saab with us? Absolutely. Abid Saab, my question for you would be that we've heard about the problem and the challenges at length. What has been the response of the government entities, you know, to overcome these challenges? Has there been skill development, some programs, some major policy interventions that you can talk about?
Well, thank you very much. First thing first, we know that natural phenomena, they are difficult to control, but one can always avoid getting those natural phenomena turning into human disasters through right set of policies and practices. And the 3 experts sitting on the panel, they have already informed us that how our wrong choices of policies and wrong choices of practices, they have led us to where we are today. Now, everything is not doom and gloom. When we talk of capacity building, perhaps we assume that people who are suffering from climate change, they know nothing and they need to be trained and they need to be, their responses need to be strengthened. In fact, they are at the forefront of showing their resilience to climate change, and they know how to cope with it. I think it's the external imposed solutions that sometimes turn their life more difficult. So first, we need to come out of this notion of capacity building. I think it's all about transition. We know that we are now transiting from a safe and secure world to a more volatile world in the context of CCC crisis that you mentioned in the beginning, conflict, pandemic, COVID, and this climate change. But B, in order to now adapt to climate resilient practices and policies, someone has to bear this cost of transition. At international arena, last year we were champion of Loss and Damage Fund, where it was all about climate justice. The countries who are responsible for carbon emission, they should take care of the countries whose emission is negligible. I think the same principle we have to apply at national level and even at subnational level. So in case of Pakistan, we need to identify that the sectors as well as the people are the places who are polluting more. They need to take care of those areas, those sectors and those communities whose carbon emission is negligible. So if we can have a loss and damage fund at national level, we will be able to champion it at international level as well. So the capacity building, the best practices, yes, there are many at international level. Pakistan remained a flag bearer of climate justice and loss and damage fund in COP27, and perhaps would be doing the same again in COP28. But my point is that we also need to apply the same principle at a national level so that we can take care of the communities and people who are the least emitter, and they are perhaps suffering because of our emission, the people who are sitting in this hall and the people who are organizing it. So all of us were equally responsible, and we need to enforce that sort of climate justice at national and subnational level.
But Abid Saab, help us understand strategically what's the environment looking like? Like, for example, we've always had the discourse about Pakistan's water insecurity, and that has usually been a problem. Okay, how do we come up with a water treaty? Most of the water that is running through the rivers in Pakistan does not
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now, Dr. Saab?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, brilliant. So I wanted to know from the strategic point of view, are we building ground up? You know, some of my panelists, in fact, Marvi pointed out that we are always in a crisis mode. Comes a disaster, we put our heads together. Sometimes it's a hit and miss for us. We handled the COVID well, but at the same time, since the 2005 earthquake, we put the National Disaster Management units together. What role have they played in trying to track the changes that are coming, and how is Pakistan planning for a country of 250 million people? How are we becoming food secure? How are we becoming resistant to all the impact that climate change is bringing in? What is Islamabad thinking at this point in time?
You see, when we talk of climate change, there is a federal ministry at climate change, but then everything that needs to be implemented, that gets implemented at provincial level. And to me, the major challenge facing policy landscape on climate change resilience, it's all about coordination and it's all about synchronization of our policies and practices. So the federal government of course, it can come up with some sort of umbrella guidelines. It cannot give you the climate change policy per se. It can provide a climate change policy framework that different provinces have to adapt to. Now, again, when it comes to provinces, for example, in case of agriculture and food security, there would be Department of Food, there would be Department of Agriculture, there would be Department of Irrigation, there would be Department of Livestock, there would be Department of Forestry, there would be Department of Revenue, there would be Department of Urban Planning, Finance, etc., etc. So you can count at least 20 to 25 different departments that needs to act together at provincial level in order to ensure that the climate change policy framework gets implemented in the province. And then all those departments, they need to talk to their counterpart in other provinces,
Right.
and they need to talk to the federal government. So I think this synchronization and this integration and this coordination, at times there are certain positive things taking place which the other department, they don't know. We used to give this example that in urban cities, one department comes and construct the road, and then another comes and start digging it because they have to lay the pipes for drainage, and then third. So the same is happening in case of climate change resilience, that there are some good things happening in silos, and now our challenge is that how we can integrate all of this with private sector.
Absolutely.
Private sector
Those
is part of
silos
solution.
sometimes seem like one of Pakistan's best kept secrets, but we hope that the coordination comes through. I want to know if Ali Saab can hear me well. Ali Saab, am I audible to you? Okay, I think we're going to try and fix that. Fahim Saab, we keep hearing, after looking at the devastating urban flooding in Karachi, and, after even the rainfalls and the floods that happened in 2022, some thought, very naively like me, that perhaps it's going to solve the problem of water scarcity for a city like Karachi. Why did that not happen? Why were we unable to harvest that water?
This is a city that runs on water tankers instead of pipes. So asking me why we were not able to harness that water is truly naive. I would like to draw attention of our attendees here today to the fact that how does this climate change is actually impacting us. We're mostly talking about flooding. Paracha Sahab did speak about heat waves and heat islands. I remember 1992 floods. On 18th of September, this is just after the Mangla Dam was full after the monsoon rains. On 18th September, the water inflows into Mangla reservoirs were only 10,000 cusics. And by 19th, they had gone up to 1 million. The spillways, which were supposed to be used in case of such an emergency, were blocked by the generals and the brigadiers, Bangalows, expanding into the area of Mangla spillways. So ultimately, the poor chap, the general manager Mangla, had to open the floodgates. 15,000 villages were inundated overnight. I mean, drowned, flooded. Let's come to 2010 floods. 2010 floods, people even in Kashmir, in India, in Afghanistan, were really praying for rains. And the cloudburst that took place on 29th of July 2010 poured so much water that the next day I was there with Dr. Deep Rizvi, there were 29 feet of water over Pir Sabak village. Naushera was completely inundated. In less than 18 hours, the river had literally jumped out of its banks. So there was. By August 8th of August, the embankment just short of Sakhar Barrage had been breached at Tori. and the water was literally making its way to Manchar Lake. 2011, 43 million acre feet of water was poured over southern Sindh, Badin and all this, this area. And in 2022, the waters in that inundated Sevan, Dadu, all that area, mostly came from breached small dams and medium-sized dams in Balochistan. And just to give you a reference, Jacobabad is about at 200 feet above mean sea level, and Manchar and Sevan, the southeastern port, is about 100. So there's 100 feet. So it was completely inundated. Now, rivers are meant to drain water. They're basically water drainage channels. So we have encapsulated in this river. So once the water came out, it had no way to go back into the river. So the only one was Indus Jhelum, Manchar Indus Link Canal, and that took. So the problem is literally man-made. It is not, nature plays its role, but it is us who have created. So until we understand that, we cannot talk about the community's resilience.
It's definitely man-made. Mari, I'll let you comment on that. And once again, attempt to get in touch with Ali. Yes, please. Ali Saab, can you hear me?
Ji, I can hear you.
Oh, brilliant. Ali Saab, any wins you would like to report? Because right now, it seems that we are failing big time when it comes to building climate resilience in a country like Pakistan. Can you report back any wins, anything that you see as, as the light at the end of the tunnel?
Ji, first we need to understand a problem in 1 or 2 minutes, and then where the light hopefully can come. Problem of climate change and its damages, as illustrated by several speakers earlier, are mostly at local level. And let's go to Paracha Saab's presentation. Plastic, air, water, floods, emissions. All 5 things have the most serious manifestation at the local level. But in order to address them at the local level, we do not have a mechanism called local government. Once you don't have the local government, you cannot have local plans of action. You cannot have local level regulators. You cannot have local level capacity and competence to deal with those issues. And you cannot have the local level ownership to address those issues. It becomes very top driven and dependent on whatever assistance or guidance can come from the federal capital or the provincial capitals. Now, how do we go from there? Because there is no local institutions, there's local level, absence of local level data, local level science, and local level competencies. And that, I hope, this is the tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel that you are asking me. Hopefully, we can work on that. It's not a rocket science. It begs for a partnership in the private sector, local research institutions, and they start generating local data, local action plans, and local engagement in terms of initiatives such as in plastics, air quality, water, flooding, and emissions. That gap of local governance need to be filled while we get our act together, federal level, to have the local governments. I think a beginning can be made and it can be extremely impactful. Please remember that our per capita income has gone down and it will keep going down. A recent World Bank report has shown that by 2050, our GDP will reduce by about 20%. And that means that there is no future for us and nutrition and kind of issues that we're talking, as well as private sector investments. But it is the interest of the private sector to take proactive steps. And in order to do that, we don't have to wink in the dark. Sufficient federal level or sometimes provincial level policy frameworks and the ecosystem exists, such as the government has recently approved National Adaptation Plan. Whatever local level resilience investments we do, that can be measurable, that can be very impactful. It can lift the people above the poverty line or reduce their vulnerabilities to those 5 elements that Amir referred to. But most importantly, we'll be ticking boxes of our national policy. We will not have to invent something new. So my submission is, we need to come out of rhetoric. Rhetoric is that Pakistan is the most vulnerable country. Let's accept that we may not be the most vulnerable country, but we are the most ill-prepared country. We keep saying that our contribution to emissions is less than 1%. But please remember that more than 100 countries have less emissions than Pakistan. The world is unfair to them as well. But please also remember that about 1% of total global emissions, if that comes from Pakistan, it's the same degree of emissions, same level of percentage emissions that is coming from broader countries or from Australia. That means the ratio of our emissions is disproportionately higher than our economy level. And Sidra, my last point in this, in order to give my punchline on this, you please recall the graph in the very first slide Prata Saab showed. You saw that the emissions level is increasing at a much higher level, whereas the economy is not growing at the same level. It gives me 3 conclusions. 1, this data may not be correct. Government of Pakistan's reporting may be exaggerated reporting for whatever consideration. Second, our production systems may not be very efficient in terms of energy consumption, and therefore we emit more emissions. So these 2 points can be the central points going forward if we wish to have greater action and impact. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I think what you have said is something I have found the entire panel to be resonating with. You're absolutely spot on that the last year and all the conversation which is around climate impact seems to center of how vulnerable we are, whereas our contribution to the emissions on a global stage hasn't been a lot. But you're right. We have to adopt a different way of looking at it, that we are not very well prepared. And I saw the same skepticism come out in all our subject experts' comments. So ladies and gentlemen, again, being cognizant of the time, I want to thank all my panelists. Thank you, Ali Saab. Thank you, Dr. Abid, for joining us online. Thank you for Haim Saab, Amreen, and Marvi. I know there's so much that we could have discussed, but we are short of time. May I request you to please come together for a group picture, and then we're going to transition into our next panel.
Abid, I think we can have our picture here in Islamabad. We cannot join them.
May we have a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, Abid Saab. Thank you, Ali Tawqir Saab, for once again joining us. And I know the photo bit of it sounds and reminds us more of a wedding party in Pakistan, where you have to wait for video and have to come together. But nonetheless, we have a wonderful lineup. I'm also cognizant that our program may be a little shuffled. You were expecting a keynote address right now, but we'll transition right into our next panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, this one is about plastic and waste management. Again, a very, very critical topical subject for all of us. This panel will discuss the roadmap of the plastic waste reduction and better management of the industrial waste. The panelists will also discuss the current legislation of banning the single-use plastic in Punjab and Islamabad. How ineffective has it been, or how effective has it been in implementation? The status of recycling market in Pakistan. Even at a global stage, some of the most well-versed countries who also are cognizant of their understanding and their responsibility, they are also failing at making sure that all plastic waste is adequately managed. So what does it mean for a country like Pakistan? And of course, the infrastructure hurdles that we are facing in this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity of introducing my panel to you. We have, of course, with us from CORE. Let me just juggle my papers through a little bit. Yes, the Chief Executive Officer and the Founding Director of CORE. CORE stands for Collect and Recycle Alliance. He's also the Head of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at Nestle at Pakistan and Afghanistan. He's responsible to lead institutional networking and multi-stakeholder engagement for public policy and business advocacy. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sheikh Waqar Ahmad. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, my next panelist is a PhD in environment discipline. Her work mostly focuses on environment resource management and environmental safeguards, environment and social framework in the bank finance operations. She's also in the water resource management sector in her previous job. Her current engagement is in the capacity of a senior environmental specialist with the World Bank Group, Islamabad Country Office, Pakistan. Please welcome Ms. Rahat Jabin. Rahat is linked to us virtually. She's joining us, and in my personal capacity, I know her as a big advocate of the blue economy, of the ocean economy as well. Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest is the Chief Executive Officer for Engro Polymer and Chemicals Limited. Previously, he's also served as the Chief Executive Officer of Engro Vopak and various other companies as well. He has over 30 years of corporate experience in manufacturing, HR, HSE, and procurement. Please welcome Mr. Jahangir Paracha. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, is our guest, who is the CEO of Lahore Waste Management Company. He's also a former civil servant, Pakistan Administrative Service Officer. Please welcome Mr. Badr Sahabdeen. If I'm not wrong, we have one more panelist, and perhaps just let me double check on that one. No, that would be it. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get this conversation started.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to my panel. We're going to connect with our online guests shortly, but first and foremost, Waqar Sahab, thank you for flying in. How does the private sector of Pakistan look at our vulnerability, and what is it doing to build our capacity in resilience? You've been an advocate for very long, but just the collection and recycling poses its own hurdles and challenges. How are you looking to resolve them?
Thank you very much, Sidra. I'm audible for everyone? Yes? No?
Gee, now your mic as well.
So now okay. That's great. So I have to keep closer to me. So thank you very much once again. I think it's a great initiative where we all together starting from climate change. And plastic is very much part of climate change. It's not very far away. It has its own implication for climate change. So when the question that you have raised, you know, what private sector is doing. So I think the initiative itself, the CORE, which is Collect and Recycle Alliance, is a private sector initiative, but we didn't leave it only to private sector. We also engaged the leading think tanks. In fact, Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Dr. Abid was just here. He was on our board. And then we also engaged WWF, UNDP. So organizations which are very much advanced in terms of not only they're also talking about plastic and its implication, and also engaging private sector, both positively and criticizing them as well. So the idea was to think collectively, because the challenge is so big, and not only in Pakistan, but also worldwide, that this cannot be dealt alone. If one company today says, whether it's Unilever, Nestle, Pepsi, or the local large corporations, or the bigger corporation like Engro, that is, or the non-profit, that we can settle this issue alone, it's not possible. The challenge is very, very big. So that we require a collective response. And of course, the partnership with the government is very, very important. But private sector can always lead the discussion and help us find solutions. So the companies are responsible, are playing very responsibly. I can give you multiple examples. I start with Pepsi has its own target that they're going to achieve with many thousand tons of recycling of PET. Nestle has recently, we have the similar target, but then we have recently changed all our plastic straws into paper straw. And I can tell you this is a huge investment that we have made because none of competition was doing it, so it's a cost.
But if I may just interrupt you right there, it's commendable that you've replaced the plastic straw with a recyclable straw, but at the same time you continue launching new variants of your drinks, which is more plastic bottles.
But if you look at the number, the target that we have put in place, and all the companies, not only Nestle, all the companies have put in place, how much plastic we are going to reduce. So if you look at that bigger number, that is going down. So that's a positive side of it. And similarly, Coca-Cola came up with the idea of the plastic road in Islamabad, and they want to do in other places also. So there are a number of ideas. Unilever is working very closely in the southern part of Pakistan, working on a clean city from plastic in Rahim Yar Khan. So there are initiatives taken by the private sector. In fact, a very interesting initiative that we took as a private sector under the Core Alliance. Just 2 years back, you cannot use, or you will not allowed to use any recyclable plastic in your food grade packaging. It took us 2 years to convince the governments at the national level and all the food authorities at the provincial level to allow food grade plastic as a recycled material going into our food packaging. And we very successfully done it, but it took 2 years. It was a kind of an alien thought to the government that it can be done. And we have to bring it back, the ideas from Saudi Arabia, to show them, it's a halal mechanism. Though it's been done in the West, it's nothing new. Now the bottles are done 100% in plastic, in recycled plastic. So those kind of challenges are there. But I think private sector now is cognizant of this thing, that this is the challenge that we have to address up front, and we have to take a lead in that, but we need collaboration. Right. We need more collaboration from the government side.
When we say collaboration, of course, sometimes it will be at loggerheads with business objectives. Jahangir Saab, various initiatives are being taken. I see the same sentiment resonating in this group and in all my interactions where corporates do want to bring about a positive change. They're not the villain here. But what are some of the real problems when it comes to scaling up? In a country like Pakistan, we have a sophisticated enough distribution center. When the products can reach the people, why is it that we have such severe problems when it comes to collection and recycling of these plastics?
Thank you, Sidra. We just have to look east to our neighbor, and primarily in India, what they have done is that there's a plastic waste management law which extends the responsibility of the people who produce plastics or use it for packaging. They have to ensure that it is collected, recycled, and properly managed. Now that's a law that law does not exist in Pakistan. You're doing it, companies which are doing it, it's their goodwill, or their corporates, headquarters are requiring them. There is no law in Pakistan which requires me, if I'm making plastic packaging, to collect it. Now, when India brought this law, it immediately started a local level collection effort, because obviously some funding was coming from these companies, and plastic to fuel technology got, kind of commercialized. These are small, 1 to 2 tons, very small cities, and a larger size plants of 10 to 15 tons, which are converting plastic into fuel. An industry got generated, collection got generated, but all of this started when there was a law which was put in, and people who wanted to do, I'm sure a lot of people are not following it also, but then you are going against the law. So that was the first step they took. The second step they took was that they really enforced Basel Convention, and which means that you cannot import any hazardous plastic waste from all over the world, which Pakistan was doing. So you're giving incentives to people to primarily bring in plastic from outside, primarily sell it in Pakistan, for which they're actually being paid. So if you are in one of the developed countries, you are actually paying somebody to bring that plastic to Pakistan and just sell it here. So the person who's involved in this trade was making money from both ends, selling in Pakistan and obviously getting paid to bring it to Pakistan. Now, I must compliment our last Minister of Climate Change, Honorable Ms. Sherry Rahman. She got this new law approved from our cabinet of Pakistan, which is that there is now in place since 30th of June, hazardous waste import policy of Pakistan, which requires that if you bring in something, you need a prior informed consent of the country. So if you're bringing in from US, let's say, the US EPA has to certify that what is coming to Pakistan through a lab test is not hazardous waste. So that's what is required under Basel Convention, that both countries need to certify this is not hazardous. Now, when you enforce this law, automatically you are going to create a market in Pakistan, because this, all sorts of waste which was coming to Pakistan, it was easy to bring it, that won't come to Pakistan, and you will create a local ecosystem which will go and feed into obviously lots of recycling industry which will get developed. So companies, some of the companies which are operating in Pakistan right now, if they are operating in India, there's a lot more of regulatory burden they take than in Pakistan. Thank you.
So I think the regulatory environment leaves a lot to be desired, but then again, the onus cannot completely be shifted on them. The social behaviors here are extremely important, and there'll be various leakages. I'll give you an example. Just, when we were at the cusp of that IT revolution, if you look at the years from 2005 to 2010, Pakistan allowed for second-hand used gadgets and laptops to come, desktops to come in, because we thought we needed those gadgets and they're cheaper somehow. And this was part of the world's way of dealing with their plastic wastage, because they were signatories in their own countries. Okay, we have to come up with a responsible way. It was so easy for them to dump these second-hand computers to us. Most of them were also not functional. We'd find out later, but then we'll be stuck with them. But coming to you, Rahat, I see you as a big advocate of the blue economy. I have questions relating to circular economy. First and foremost, am I audible to you?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. And we can hear you as well. So let's try to close the loop on how much of this unprocessed waste and plastic are we dumping into the sea, and how polluted is our coastline becoming? How is it impacting marine and fisheries? Because I know that's a subject very close to your heart.
Thanks, Siddharth, for inviting me in this panel discussion. So since the cognizant of the time, I'm not going to be more giving the context. So just quick answer to your question and the topic we are talking about, the plastic and the circular economy. So yes, I think if we talk about the terms of data and the numbers, so they are always varies. So I think now we have seeing is believing kind of the approach. Everybody knows the plastic is everywhere. Everybody knows the waste is everywhere. If you just walk around out of your hotel or out of your place, you will see at any side of the street and lane, you will see the dumping of the waste and plastic, including plastic. So we don't have this. So answer to your question, how much plastic and how much waste we are going to be in the Arabian Sea. So there are many and various studies, and one of the current study which I have led that study in Karachi, in Sindh and Balochistan, the coastal area. So which is about I think more than overall the 30 million tons of solid waste we are basically annually dumping into the sea, which is the 9% is the plastic waste. So Indus River basically is a major carrier of plastic waste into the ocean. This is another study which I led for the Indus River and plastic, how the plastic is leakage in the system. So giving you a quick background, why plastic I have initiated. So some time back, there was a study which I, there was some research article which I was reading, and that the world global rivers basically polluting the micro plastic in the sea, in the sea ecosystem, marine ecosystem. So in that case, the Indus River become the second highest, which is contributing the microplastic in the marine ecosystem. So this is basically alerting my mind that, okay, this is Indus River, let's track how much plastic we are leaking in the system. Through this Indus River coming from the northern side and up to emptying into the sea, Arabian Sea of the Karachi coast. So in that study, actually, I found that there are many numbers, but nobody knows the actual numbers, how much plastic is there in the system, in the leakage in the system. So this is, I figured out that whenever you're planning and managing something, we need some kind of a data and numbers. So in that case, I think there are studies which in the World Bank study we have done. There is ongoing study by IFC we have done, and under the plastic circular economy. So there are IUCN, there's UN, UNDP they have done. So there are many studies. Maybe you can average the number of plastics and number of the waste we are emptying into the sea without any treatment. So this is one of the bigger issue, and of course, problem is huge at the ground level. No single entity can deal this issue of the plastic and the waste management in the country. So we have discussed in the earlier discussion also, there are many gaps, there are many ad hocism in the system to manage the plastic and to manage the waste management. This is how we are working right now. I think there is a time, many studies, recommendations sending has identified that there is a gaps in the policy, there is a gaps in the coordination collaboration.
Sure.
So I stop here.
I'm going to bring this one to Waqar again. Waqar, you've worked very closely with the governments as well. There was already a system in place, the way we collect our waste, the way the country itself has been managing it. Of course, with the growing population, our systems are becoming overburdened. But where do you think is a capacity issue, and what can the corporate sector do to help the country build its capacity?
So, Sidra, I think the bigger challenge here in Pakistan is the infrastructure. So, infrastructure is not something which private sector can take a lead and create. But what it can done, that it is facilitated by the government. For example, if you want a new collection and recycling industry to be promoted in the country, you can come up with some kind of financial schemes. Another good example was when we wanted to promote solar. So there was State Bank was promoting financing for solar energy, whether on the industry side, whether for the home appliances also. So if we really want private sector to take a lead, I think government need to take a step forward, provide a policy framework where new investments can come in this specific sector. So there are very good recyclers in the country, but the size and scale cannot meet the challenge of a city even, or a town even. They're doing a good job. But still, there are investments which are fueled by private sector. The big recycler have been supported by large corporates because they have their own targets to meet, but they cannot meet the whole target because all these big corporates are working here. They have a very small scale. So the best thing is that if incentives are given to this specific sector of collection and recycling, which are mostly, for example, the collection is done mostly are very unorganized sector. So this is not like a proper sector has been there.
The sorting of
it's very informal. It's very informal. But there's a lot of space. For example, if we look at today, we all talk about there are various kind of plastics. There are plastics which are problematic. There are plastics which are not problematic. For example, the PET bottle today, its rate is almost 200 rupees per kg. And I joke with many people, if you throw a PET bottle in the air, before it lands, there will be someone there to catch it because it has a price and a very variable price. And so, but the collection mechanism is still very informal. Then it goes to the recycling companies, And then what we all see in terms of our blanket, in our denim, a lot of other places, it goes. Or into cutlery also that you see.
Absolutely. And in terms of social behavior as well, we can talk a lot about, okay, there should not be any single-use plastic, but come Bakra Eid, we all want our plastic bags. We think it's the most hygienic way to do things. So I do want to ask you, Jahangir Sahab, about social behaviors. I mean, it's one thing that the government, the policymakers, the capacity building, the corporates would try to do something. We somehow have this thought ingrained in our head that plastic is important. You're talking about PET bottles. I try to throw away a plastic bag and my domestic help says, please give it to me, because they see it as a wonderful storage device. So Jahangir Sahab, how do we change social behaviors around waste?
Well, I mean, if you go historically and you look at and talk to your grandmother or Nana, Nani, we used to have a kabadi wala culture in our society, and everything was recycled. So this subcontinent at least has a history where waste was collected. There was an economic value to it. Now, to have economic value to plastic, as we were talking about PET bottle, I think we just need to look what has happened to the renewable energy in last, now. Go back 20 years, solar and wind were very, very new technologies, and people had doubts that they will be at one time be considered as our salvation to address the climate change. On plastics also, so much of effort and energy is going on right now that US Gulf Coast this year, and a plant is being built which will recycle 1,000 tons. That's the number we need to do. I talked about India. The largest plant right now is 15 tons a day. The moment you move to 1,000, you're talking about economies of scale. And if technology is going to be the salvation, if you can watermark every plastic and you can segregate it through technology, that is what will happen. So there is hope. Next 10 years, I think because the problem has become so big now, that solution will have to come through technology. Just habits, obviously teaching children, when we were younger, or maybe our parents were younger, they were not throwing their bottles or whatever waste they had, they were collecting. Even the newspaper was collected, at homes, and then it was sold to the kabadi.
Growing up, we didn't have bottled water.
Yeah,
I mean, to begin with that, I find it really cute internationally. You'd go for your exotic trip to Europe and you come back with this fancy idea that everybody is having filtered water. You think it's amazing. You sit in a cafe and you say, oh no bottled water for me. I'll just take tap water. And I find it to be such an anomaly. I'm a frequent traveler to Lahore and Islamabad. They have a big badge in my bathroom sink saying that this tap water is not drinkable. But at the same time, they have a glass bottle right there for me to drink water from, and I don't know the source of that water. So we have many gaps to look at. I'm wondering if we have Badr Sahab with us. Badr Sahab, can you hear me? I see him online, but is he with us? Badr Sahab, can you hear me well? I'm afraid I'm not audible. And Badr Sahab, yes.
Oh, sorry, this is Bob, not Badr, if you're referring to.
Babar, sorry, I still have your name down as Badr. My apologies for that. Babar Sahab, can you hear me well? And will we be able to see you?
Yes, sorry, there was a big function going on, so I was not in the office. But sure. I hope I am audible.
Okay, thank you so much, Babar Sahab, for joining us. My question to you would be, since we've been talking about waste management and plastics, I see these harrowing reports coming from India where they say even their biggest rivers, which are of religious and social importance to them, like the Ganges and the Jamna and the Saraswati, they've all been polluted to a point where they're called dead rivers. What can Pakistan learn from that? And unfortunately, we're still dumping a lot of waste and plastic into our rivers and water bodies. What's your take on that?
Okay, so as far as dumping of the waste is concerned, I think it is a serious challenge in Pakistan. But when it comes to Lahore, we have a facility for landfill site as well. It's probably the biggest landfill site of Pakistan, not 100% scientific, but still waste is being managed there. There's managed disposal going on there. And then we are also planning to build a new one as well that will resolve the issues. But again, when you talk about the larger cities or when you talk about even the smaller cities in Pakistan, the dumping of the waste is a serious challenge. The reason is that there is a certain cost attached to it. So for instance, when you are talking about collection of the waste and the transportation of the waste, in most of the countries who want environmental, sustainable and scientific kind of landfill sites or disposal, the cost goes up to around $40 a ton. But when you talk about Pakistan, even with large operations in Lahore, the cost is not more than $20-30 even for transportation. So yes, for developing countries, because of resource constraints, it is a challenge, especially in the north. You see that people dump in the rivers as well. But I think at various district levels, a lot of steps have been taken. Most of the deputy commissioners impose 144s on throwing waste in the river as well. A lot of steps have been taken. I see Waqar Saab here. When I was DC Hunza, we did a huge project where we made Hunza plastic bag free. So yes, steps have been taken, but a lot of investment needs to happen. A lot of international donors need to come in. The private sector needs to be involved in order to resolve this issue.
Thank you so much, Babar Saab. And again, very cognizant of time. This is a very able panel. Or ek tishnagi si reh jati hai. Wish we could discuss more. But once again, thank you, Raha. Thank you, Babar Saab, for making time for us today. Thank you, Jahangir Saab and Waqar Saab. May I request you both to come together for a photograph, please. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for my panel. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to quickly dovetail into our first keynote speech. And this is a very important subject, and it will bring in some global perspective to our conversation here. This is the global prospect relating to plastic and waste management. Please join me for a message that is sent to us online in the interest of the time difference that we have. This is from the head of Research and Development Packaging, Excellence and Technology at Unilever. This is by Colin Kerr. And the topic of this message is the global prospect related to plastic and waste management.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity today to share the Unilever perspective on the circular economy of plastics. My name is Colin Kerr, and I am the head of the Packaging Excellence and Technology team here in Unilever within our R&D organisation. We are a group of 40 experts in material science, in packaging materials, and in digital modelling. And we are focused on developing and delivering sustainability improvements for packaging through our different and alternative packaging materials and technologies. Many of you will be familiar with Unilever as an organisation, but for those who are not, let me just start by a few words. Unilever is a fast-moving consumer goods organisation. We sell branded products. We have over 400 brands that we sell in 190 countries globally. And we sell many of the world's most appreciated brands. Our ambition is to make sustainable living commonplace. And that's reflected in our packaging and plastics strategies. To stop plastic pollution linked to our products, we have made ambitious commitments for a waste-free world. With 4 interlinked commitments, we aim to reduce the amount of virgin plastic that we use by 50% and to ensure that 100% of our plastic packaging is recyclable. To improve overall plastic circularity, we've also set targets for 25% of post-consumer plastics to be used in our products and to collect and process as much plastic as we sell. Our commitments are very ambitious, but we are making great progress against them all. One of the highlights is that we've managed to lead the industry in increasing the use of recycled plastic from 5% back in 2019 to 21% already in 2022, and we continue on that journey. Also, the majority of our packaging is now recyclable. We're working really hard to design packaging that can be recycled. Already in Pakistan, we are at 60%, and globally, in fact, we are already at 70%. But we need to continue to work together with local governments and industry in order to improve recycling infrastructure across the world, as this remains a major challenge in many markets. We've worked with local agencies in Pakistan to collect 50% of our plastics footprint already, and we are actively working to achieve 100%. Our approach to delivering on these commitments can be summarised in 3 words: less, better, no. So let me explain what I mean by that. Firstly, less plastic. Cutting down on the amount of plastic that we use through lighter designs, through refill formats, and through concentration are examples of where we can redesign in order to use less packaging and less plastics. Secondly, the use of better plastics. So if we are using plastic, let's make sure it is designed to be recycled and that we are maximising the amount of recycled plastic that we use in it. And thirdly, we also have innovations that use no plastic, cutting out plastic completely by switching to alternative packaging materials such as paper, and designing new product formats and reusable packaging models that don't require plastics at all. Now let me share with you a few examples. In India, our Lifebuoy brand recently launched hand wash powder sachets, which can be diluted at home. These are very effective products, very cost effective, at only 10 rupees a sachet, and that gives you the equivalent of a bottle of hand wash. And by reusing that bottle, we can reduce the amount of plastic that's required by 90%. To use better plastic, we're consistently looking for new opportunities to use more recycled plastic and to improve our recyclability. One example is our Lux body wash, where we are using 50% recycled PET in those bottles. In Pakistan, we have examples with our Sunsilk brand, a shampoo, where we're using 25% of recycled polyethylene. And indeed, we have examples around the world where we're using 100% of recycled plastic in a number of our packs, for example, in our Dove brand globally. Now, to remove the need for using plastic, we often need to completely rethink the type of product that we're making and the packaging that goes into it. And one recent example that we have in Europe is where, instead of a traditional laundry detergent, we have developed and launched laundry sheets. These are a waterless format and a format that requires 80% less material and therefore significantly less packaging that is required around that. And we're also piloting refill stations. We have examples in Karachi and other parts of Pakistan, and indeed all around the world, where we are piloting different sorts of refill station models as alternatives to single-use plastics. But these are just some of the innovations that we're working on. It's clear that we cannot do everything on our own. And that's why we are working with industry, with governments and other partners to advocate for global action and well-designed regulations to stop plastic pollution. For example, we're part of the Business Coalition supporting a legally binding United Nations Plastics Treaty. We also believe that optimal extended producer responsibility schemes can help to tackle waste. Well-designed schemes that can help to improve recycling systems, ensuring that the money that goes into those schemes can be invested back into waste management infrastructure development. For example, we've been working with regulators to create successful country-specific EPR models in India, in Vietnam and in the Philippines as example markets. To use our scale as a business, we're also an active member of several industry coalitions and partnerships, like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the Consumer Goods Forum, and we also fund the Circulate Capital Venture Fund, where we are investing $100 million in circular economy programs. Bringing together industry and regulators, for example, in events like this today, is key for creating a systems change to transition into a circular economy. Thank you for the opportunity to connect with you today, and I look forward with collaborating with you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that again is about commitments, pledges, and good work which is in practice right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to look at, we have with us a young advocate when it comes to the collection and the waste management part of it. Of course, when it comes to plastic, we have several community heroes who are passionately working towards it, trying to bring about a change. Let's learn more about that. We are going to indulge in the next 5 minutes about experiences, things in practice, the opportunities. I mean, we've been talking about the challenge for so long. Let's look at the possibilities and the opportunities this situation presents to us. Please join me in welcoming from Garbage Can, Mr. Ahmed Shabbar.
Hello. Hi. My name was on the panel, but I was very confused. I was like, oof, the little guy was invisible for a second. But that's all right. We're over here. How is everyone? Khair khairiyat se, theek thak, doing all right? And thank you, Sidra, for introducing me. I'll describe my work a little bit as well. Then we'll get into some positives, but I might make life a bit difficult as well. So my name is Ahmed Shabbar. I started Garbage Can Sustainable Waste Management in 2017. And the main reason for doing that was, this is one of the landfills in Los Angeles. So we don't need the photographs just yet. I started Garbage Can Sustainable Waste Management in 2016 after spending about 8 years in the US. I worked there at a nuclear reactor. I was the youngest Pakistani to work at a nuclear reactor. And then I worked on a small project with NASA as well, where we worked on removing carbon dioxide from the airstream without there being any moving parts. So I've worked with nuclear waste, I've worked with tech for the International Space Station and everything as well. And then I came back to Pakistan in 2016, and I saw kachre ka masla us waqt bhi. The reason for starting Garbage Can was because I hated living in a city that was disgusting and where nobody was really doing much about it. I went to several leaders, from political leaders to mayors to corporate leaders and everything as well. And in the end, we were like, okay, fine, let's try and do something ourselves. Usme, then I realized that not many people know how to even say recycling in Urdu, I guess. Would anybody over here know that? What would the term for recycling be in Urdu? One of the panelists I actually just mentioned over here कि हमारे नानी नाना करते थे, दादी दादा करते थे, कबाड़ का काम जो scrap या उसमें वो होता है. So I guess that was the most appropriate term that I saw. But going forward, do we know what plastic bottles are called in Urdu or in the informal industry? Gas bottle. Somebody mentioned gas bottle. And how about HDPE plastic? HDPE plastic. Any ideas? It's called guddi rubber because guddiyan usse jo bante the. So so there is a very rigorous, a very robust industry within Pakistan and within Karachi already that is working on waste management. And see, again, the reason why I asked you that question is to point out one problem. how are we going to resolve the industry issue if we don't even know the most basic terms of industry? You know, we can talk about whatever we want to talk about over here, but if we do not know what the grassroots issues are or what the basic grassroots terms are, there's literally no way that we can even engage with the local industry. So after starting Garbage Can, I, of course, faced several problems as well. 3 of my guys were kidnapped. 3 of my workers were kidnapped. I was beaten up by 6 University of Karachi guards, actually, at the behest of the Afghan mafia, that was, within the informal sector, the scavenger mafia. And just recently, about a month or so ago, our facility, our waste management facility, was shot at. I was fired upon, 3 direct shots at our vehicles. But is sending Afghan refugees back the solution? I do not think so at all, because there might be like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people that attacked us, or say maybe 1,000 people might be involved with the mafia. But to engage in inhumane, policies, practices, and shoving our, our incompetence, our corruption, etc., under the rug is not the solution at all. I also want to point out, the last 7 or 8 years, this actually wasn't the toughest thing for me. The toughest thing that has been, for me, is to convince corporate sectors, is to convince people to actually pay for the service, that this is an essential service. Waste management is an essential service, and people really need to put their money in it. So for example, one corporate entity that I visited recently, I told them that I will charge them 40,000 rupees a month. They told me, well, the Afghan or the scavenger will charge me 3,000 to 5,000 rupees a month. I was like, well, I mean, this is a huge business school. This is a huge entity. And that just blew me away. I was like, all right, I guess. If you, at one point, people are, promoting plastics, but at the same time, they're not really willing to pay from the pocket. And as the conversation has been going on at COP, that the polluter really needs to pay, and that we really, if we are to find solutions for the waste management issue, all of us really need to be serious about it. Moving onwards, can anybody tell me, I'm going to take a minute or so more, mujhe bata dijiyega, Sidra, how much time I would have left. Moving on, do we know about other social issues that might be connected with the waste management industry? How many, how about this? How many of the primary waste managers in the world are women? What percentage of the primary waste managers in the world are women? 73% of the primary waste managers in the world are women, because mainly, women are homemakers, and they have to, they're the very first line of defense against waste management, but their labor goes invisible and unpaid. So we need to engage them a bit more as well. Then, of course, there is the perpetuation of drug addiction as well. And, well, I've already touched upon the refugee crisis. And considering, there's also a talk about banning plastic bags. That does not make sense to me as a policy. That's, again, one of those greenwashing attempts, I believe, at very quick fixes. Because there is a huge labor industry that is attached with that industry. So we need to move towards just transition and not engage any further in greenwashing or, in climate blaming as well, as we've been doing on international platforms as well. So anyway, so these are some of the thoughts that I wanted to leave you guys with. There are easy solutions as well. For example, how do, this landfill facility in Los Angeles resolves their bird issue very easily. Can anybody guess how they do that? Because birds can, of course, pick up trash and throw trash elsewhere. Any guesses on how there's a mountain right over there, right up top. Any guesses how they would resolve that? Oh, yes, they broke the suspense. Anyway, Falcons. As simple as that. So instead of trying to think about very complex situations, very, talking about all sorts of projects, we really need to be very honest with ourselves and think about, how we're actually going to move forward. So my further introduction was that I also train journalists on environmental journalism, and I run something called Pakistan Mahauliyati Tahaffuz Movement. So when she said advocate, I'm not just a waste management advocate, I'm also a climate advocate. That's why some of my conversation was a bit difficult. Anybody over here know how many climate marches have happened? This is my last question. How many climate strikes or climate marches or climate protests have taken place in Pakistan? 5? Yeah, 1 person. So there's been 3 or 4 that have been happening already. In 2019, it was a national strike. 2023, just 4 or 5 months ago, I led the Karachi strike, and there is another strike coming up on 17th November 2023. So, and where many young people are. Sorry, I apologize. That was supposed to be my last question. My last question is, how many people in this room are under 30? 4, 5, 6, under 25? Under 25. Yeah, 4, 5, 6. Well, I'm going to raise my hand. No. So we really need to involve the youth in our conversations as well, and that's one recommendation that I'd like to make as I leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed, for once again giving us all a reality check, not just in terms of our waste management, but also our ages. But then again, let's stray away from the ageism. Ladies and gentlemen, the problem is very real. One of the best quotes I've heard in this regard, which I, sort of drew inspiration from in the last climate change conference as well, Climate Conference Pakistan, was, we feel that we have inherited this world from our ancestors, when the reality is that we've only borrowed it from our children for just a very short span of time. So what we do today is going to impact generations. Anyways, those under the age of 20, 25 are having to solve an issue they did not contribute in creating. So that's the kind of mindfulness we need to practice. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker is a visionary leader with a wealth of experience in the field of technology and innovation. He has been a part of Dolens since June 2019 as the Director of Technologies. His journey in engineering and technology commenced with his graduation at the Aircraft Engineering from Istanbul Technical University in Turkey. Over the last 26 years at the Arçelik, Mr. Bengal's career flourished as he held various pivotal roles in production, research, and development. His unwavering dedication culminated in his position as the Group Manager of R&D at the Arçelik before embarking on a new chapter as an expatriate leader at Dolens in 2019. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, may I request for his keynote address, the Director of Technologies at Dolens, Mr. Haroon Bengal, to please take the stage.
One more again, Haroon Bingöl, Technology Director in Dolens. Apart from this one, also same, Andrew came from South Africa. I was assigned in South Africa for 4 years. The stark reality that our world is facing an unprecedented climate crisis, rising temperatures, extreme weather events, and the loss of biodiversity are signs that the Earth's delicate balance is under the threat. We are at a critical juncture where action is no longer an option, but an imperative. Our Dolens commitment for sustainability aligns seamlessly with Arçelik's global theme, which is inspire sustainable lives in every home. And our Progress Today, Preserve Tomorrow philosophy embodies the idea that every step we take today should contribute to a better future. Arçelik has approved science-based targets for a well below 2 degrees scenario and has also committed to the Science-Based Target Initiative to set as 1.5 degree aligned 2030 near-term target as well as a 2020 long-term target, which will be submitted until March 2024. Arçelik's global renewable energy capacity was 10.1 megawatt in 2022. Now it is 18.2 megawatt. And by end of the 2025, we are going to have 100 megawatt globally, almost 10 times of the 2022. So in Doğulunz, what kind of things are ongoing, especially for the refrigerator and then for the air conditioner? Our journey towards the sustainability began with the redesign of our refrigerator range in 2017, where we introduced R600 refrigerant gas, setting the stage for our unwavering commitment to environmental sustainability. Through innovative engineering and dedication, we have achieved a substantial cumulative reduction of approximately 43% energy consumption across our product range. Not only do these advancements benefit our customers by lowering their energy bills, but they also benefit our shared planet by reducing our carbon footprint. The decision to transition from R134 to R600 refrigerants had a profound impact. This change alone had led to 99.9% average reduction in greenhouse gas emission per unit basis. By 2020, our average annual emissions were already reduced by 101.5 kg of carbon dioxide emissions. As we moved forward in 2020, we continued our efforts, resulting in an additional reduction of 21.7 kg of carbon dioxide. Looking ahead to 2029, our ambitious target is to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions by an additional 22.6 kg of carbon dioxide. Today, our commitment extends beyond refrigerators as we work on split air conditioning. By the way, from the scratch, our R&D center in Doğulunz, with the help of Turkey, we redesigned a split AC and then we started to launch this one 2 years back. By transitioning from R410 to R32 refrigerants, we have reduced the greenhouse gas negative impact of each product by 23%. Moreover, our air conditioners now boast a significant 7% reduction in energy consumption per unit. And we are committed to a steady annual improvement in greenhouse gas emissions reductions of 6% until 2028. Beyond that, our vision includes a transition to R290 refrigerant place of R32 in 2019. As you know, for R290, a lot of companies working, but there is a safety issue for this one. I believe once technology advances, we are going to be able to use this one safely. Advocate for change. It is not just about the products we make. We are actively collaborating with regulatory bodies in Pakistan, such as NICA, PICA, to finalize minimum energy performance standards for all products. We are pushing for these standards to be implemented as soon as possible, as they play a crucial role in promoting energy-efficient products and making a positive impact on our climate. In conclusion, The path to more sustainable world is not easy one, but it is necessary. Businesses like Arçelik and Dolun's understand this responsibility and are taking significant steps to address the climate crisis. Our journey is a testament to our unwavering commitment to a sustainable future. Together, we can shape a greener world and a brighter, more sustainable future for our children and for our grandchildren. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Harun. And indeed, Dolans is just not making an impact and talking about these very important capacity building and a new filter in the way we look at things, we approach matters. But we've recently seen a wonderful tie-up with the next generation of people who will be playing a more active role. They now have a research and development tie-up with the NUST University, Islamabad, where again, emissions, carbon footprint, the ability to actually manage and control the waste, and more importantly, just being mindful about the technology is driven to the heart of things. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, there has been enough conversation about how many resources do we have, and can the business go on as usual? I mean, even if you look at 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we thought that these subjects are, for people who are tree huggers, who perhaps look at life very differently, who are cognizant, and so should we be, but it seemed like a distant problem. I think that has been turned on its head since the last year, when we've seen the catastrophe happen, when we've had floods of biblical measure come in and cover about 1/3 of our land, and we've found ourselves with meager resources to help our people and to plan for the days to come. I think all the panelists and speakers so far have reiterated that we are not prepared well at all. So this forum and all of your presence is once again pushing the stakeholders, the policymakers, and even people at a micro level like you and I to do our bit. And when we claim that we are here for good, which is what the organization and the speaker who's next going to be up will be talking about. I see Asad Shah Sahab here. He's also posted a lot of questions that he'd like answered. On LinkedIn, he's posted them. And sir, I've read them through, so I'll definitely be taking them up. But it's time to invite our next speaker, who's had a fantastic run as a person coming in from the world of banking and finance. When we talk about climate financing and the resources that are needed for the days to come and to do good that we are all here for, he is perhaps going to have the most insights. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our next speaker who's dialing in from Hong Kong. He's formerly also been there at JP Morgan, but now he serves as the global CEO of Standard Chartered Bank. We have the honor of having with us Mr. Bill Winters. And I'm wondering if we have connected with him already. Okay, we're going to take a couple of minutes. He's in Hong Kong, so we're going to try and do that. So some of the questions that has been playing up on everyone's mind is how do we make that coordination happen? I believe that there's great work being done in silos. There are young innovators who are trying to come up with ways of doing things, and that I learned very recently at the Second Life Pakistan Challenge, which was specifically a sustainability challenge focused on plastic waste management and giving a second life to recycled plastic. This was again spearheaded by Unilever Pakistan, co-partnering with Steed Ventures. But initiatives of that sort, like Shell Tameer Awards, have been happening for a very long time, inviting young people, fresh minds, with fresh thoughts to come and look at the problem. Perhaps you and I have become too jaded, thinking only about the challenges, thinking only about what's going wrong, what's not working. And as they say, if you are just going to continue cribbing, then you're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. I believe we are connected with Mr. Bill Winters. I'm just going to do a quick tech check and audio check. Are we audible to you, Mr. Winters?
So, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. And can you hear us?
I can, and I've been hearing you for a bit now. So thank you very much for.
Thank you so much, and welcome to the second Pakistan Climate Conference. The stage is all yours, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm only sorry that I'm not with you in person, but I will be visiting Pakistan shortly, probably in the early part of the new year, visiting our clients, staffs, and some friends. But in the meantime, I was very keen to participate in this session. I know how important this is. I know the stakes, and I know the seriousness with which this forum is addressing the issues. So I'll just tuck into some comments and hopefully generate a little bit of discussion. So we know that we've been talking about climate change for years, and we've tended to think of it as a problem of the future. But as we just heard from the speakers, this is not a problem of the future, it's a problem of today. It's one that we have to solve on behalf of our children, our grandchildren. It's something that is disturbing our day-to-day ever more frequently, and of course we can only expect that it will get worse if this goes unmitigated. As we sit here with barely a week going by without breaking news on the severe climate event somewhere in the world, Pakistan has sadly experienced more than its fair share of these. So as the country's oldest and largest foreign bank, Standard Chartered, we have seen firsthand the terrible impact of flooding and drought on our staff and clients in recent years. Indeed, as a bank with a deep presence in many of the high growth and emerging markets across Asia and Africa, Standard Chartered is actually aware of the impact of extreme weather on countless communities and their particular vulnerability to ever higher temperatures. So that's why we're fully committed to the net zero transition. But we've got to be honest about the scale of the challenge. Right? Despite the tremendous and fast-growing sustainable finance market, we're nowhere near the trillions of dollars of investment that are needed every single year to reach net zero in a timely fashion. And that's especially true in the emerging markets, or the markets that we call home. According to a UN report, just 60% of the financing needed to achieve the sustainable development goals in low and middle income countries is currently being met. But we should also be enthusiastic about the net zero opportunities. Net zero shouldn't just be seen as a burden or merely an exercise in risk avoidance. It's fundamentally a question of prosperity. Now, our research shows that without sufficient sustainable investment and climate adaptation, populations in high-growth developing countries could be $80 trillion poorer by 2060. That means leaving hundreds of millions of people with narrower horizons, less economic opportunity, and lower living standards. Instead, let's look at the other side of this. Through the net zero transition, we have a chance to create more resilient business models for our clients, help them to deliver jobs to a wide range of communities, and build better and healthier societies. Big question, how do we do this? So Standard Chartered's 2050 net zero roadmap was agreed by our shareholders back in 2022, following several years of building and consultation and implementation of the programs that we had. We engaged extensively with a full range of shareholders and stakeholders, including the non-governmental organizations who have been agitating so successfully for focus on this issue for many, many years. Now, during 2022, we facilitated $23.4 billion of sustainable finance. And as we make progress towards our 2030 goal, our target is $300 billion of sustainable finance raised. Recognize that it's a material bank for any one entity to help raise. It's still a fraction of what's needed in these markets. We've placed a very enormous emphasis on the need for a just transition. I know from our experience in markets that getting to net zero without supporting local communities and maintaining existing economic structures is counterproductive. It costs jobs, it costs growth, and it may even put energy supply at risk. And apart from that, a transition that's not just simply won't happen. There will not be the will amongst the people or governments to embark on the tremendous investment and changes that are necessary. At Standard Chartered, we're tackling emissions in hard-to-abate sectors head-on, seeking to maximize our impact on global emissions. In October 2021, as we set out in our 2030 targets, net zero and our financing of emissions for oil and gas, we covered the critically high-intensity industrial segments of oil and gas, power, and the metals and mining sectors. Our net zero commitment requires us to actively support our clients' decarbonization agenda. Only through their efforts, some of you in the room, will we reach net zero in our financed emissions, which is where we know we can get and where we know we can have the greatest climate impact. So we understand that clients will find the net zero process challenging. Our job is to try to partner in this endeavor, to connect you to investment flows from across the world and make sure you're provided with the right tools and products to do the job. But it's a two-way street. And we've stated our readiness to walk away from client relationships if they're unwilling to develop and execute credible net zero plans. Now, fortunately, I and all of my colleagues have been very, very impressed by the seriousness and dedication with which the vast majority of our clients are approaching this issue. In return, we offer a wide range of sustainable finance projects and products across our businesses, so green and sustainable linked bonds and loans, sustainable deposits, sustainable trade finance, and more. We also have a dedicated ESG advisory function to help clients plot out their route to greater sustainability. On balance, I can say we've received an overwhelming degree of partnership from our clients. Very, very few have said, no, we're just not going to try. Virtually all of them have said, we're trying and it's hard. And our job is to do everything that we can to be pragmatic, to make that transition more straightforward, and to do that in a just way. So allowing for ongoing economic growth and development in our faster growing markets. So responding to the climate challenge means more than just cutting emissions. We need to build physical adaptations, so defenses against higher sea levels, better protections against floods, droughts, and heat waves, and improved early warning systems for extreme weather. All of this to guard our existing way of life. Now, according to the research, and this is research that we've done at Standard Chartered, between now and 2030, an estimated minimum of $30.4 billion of adaptation investment is needed across 10 of our key markets, including Pakistan. So by 2050, that figure will be almost $500 billion. The good news is that every dollar invested in adaptation now saves $12 in the long run. So let me put this another way. We have to spend the money right now to recognize that temperatures are rising, independent of anything else that we do in our transition, because it's the right thing to do for our societies. It's also the right thing to do economically, because we will be saving $12 for every dollar that we spend today. We also recognize that these investments in adaptation tend not to be economic, measured purely on economic terms. And as a result, it's hard to find the financing for these projects. So that requires an extraordinary focus from the international community, local governments, local societies, to make this wise investment that otherwise we're going to pass by and incur much, much greater costs down the road. So we recognize that the climate challenge cannot be addressed by any one industry or government or region. We need to work together to solve common problems. I'm proud to co-lead the GFANZ, the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero, where we have a working group on emerging market and development economy capital mobilization. That's a mouthful. What it really means is we've got to get money into the developing markets that need it most, both for their adaptation and for their transition. In addition, we work closely with our regional networks and various country initiatives on financing the transition. Standard Chartered chairs the steering group for the group of Net Zero Banking Alliance. And our group chairman, Jose Viñals, is co-chair of the UN Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance. Another mouthful, another set of efforts to bring money into the hands of the people that need it most, in particular in developing economies. So Standard Chartered has got its finger in every pie, and we do that because of the stakes in our markets. We do it because, as our moderator just mentioned, we are in fact here for good, and we're trying to live to that promise. So we've been particularly keen to make progress on the expansion of public-private partnerships within the sustainable finance market. Private entities are often deterred from climate investment by a lack of liquidity in local markets or higher risk perceptions. But the problem is particularly acute in emerging markets, where investment in large-scale, long-term infrastructure is desperately needed. We believe in public finance institutions, such as multilateral development banks, the World Bank, AIIB, etc., that they can play a central role and a greater role in de-risking the early stages of individual projects and providing the first tranche of financing that allows private capital to crowd in at a later date. Now, to make sure this is done effectively, development banks need to make better use of their capital. They're currently very risk averse, and this is per their charters, and they do not make full use of the balance sheets that they have. They can also free up financing capacity by moving from an originate to hold to an originate to share model. So securitization efforts and offers by the MDBs can allow those MDBs to much more effectively use their balance.
Mr. Winters, may I request you to just hold that thought? We're having some IT glitches and we are unable to hear you. We'll just try and fix that. Just give us a moment.
I think he was just put on mute by mistake. We can hear Bell now.
I think
you can hear me now?
You're back on now. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Apologies for that. Not sure what happened. I was just beginning to say that the World Bank is doing some really innovative and creative things, and they set up a lab called the World Bank Lab. That I'm a member of this lab. It's 15 people, headed by the president of the World Bank, together with Mark Carney and Srini Vadera, co-chairing. An effort to identify ways that we can use the existing capabilities of the MDBs, starting with the World Bank, whether that's through issuance of novel guarantees or other mechanisms to dramatically increase not just the amount of money coming from MDBs, but the way that money can be leveraged with private sector capital. As we know today, roughly $1 of MDB financing generates about 95 cents of crowded in private sector capital, which of course is we're not going to solve the problem that way. We can solve the problem if we can get that number from a leverage of roughly 1-to-1 to leverage that's closer to 15-to-1, or maybe in some cases even more. So we're working on these things, but it is work in progress. Apart from the MDB and MDB exercise and MDB reforms, we're working with other key stakeholders in the Just Energy Transition Partnerships. So, for example, there's a project in Indonesia. There are 2 JETPs have been agreed in Indonesia and Vietnam. Those are great examples of public-private cooperation in action, and we hope to scale these up in many more locations. In Pakistan itself, we see considerable opportunity for climate investment. A few examples of our work so far spring to mind. We've worked with Unilever to facilitate finance for almost 9 megawatts of solar electricity for the firm's domestic operations. The facility was provided on the back of renewable financing scheme launched by the Central Bank of Pakistan. Now, we've extended a sustainable trade financing facility to Al Karam Textiles to support their export business in importing BCI cotton. And we've arranged a green bond financing by the Water and Power Development Authority to fund hydro projects, which is also Pakistan's first ever international US dollar green bond. This is just putting some toes in the water. There's so much more that we can do in Pakistan, and I can assure you we're completely committed to using all the resources of our group globally to bring our efforts to bear in the country. Now, I'll close by looking ahead to what we can expect at COP28 in Dubai. And though the centerpiece of the event for us will be Finance Day, this remains a cross-sector effort. We need to continue to connect the net zero transition to the real economy and demonstrate progress on expanding the sustainable finance market to key high-carbon industries. On the policy and government side, we're keen to see greater clarity on net zero standards and pathways, building guaranteed pipelines for climate investment, particularly in large infrastructure projects. It's vital in building confidence and encouraging greater participation. We all recognize that net zero progress in recent years has been slower than we'd like. Now we need to raise the pace by several notches. The growing frequency of extreme weather I mentioned earlier should be all the motivation we need to step up, bring more investment to the table, develop a good, strong market for carbon globally, and build that more resilient and prosperous future. So thank you again for inviting me. A pleasure to be with you and enjoying some of the comments that I've heard from others. And I hope you have a good rest of the session.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. This would do for now, but next time, for the next climate conference, we sure do look forward to seeing you here in person as well. Ladies and gentlemen, what we need is a way of rethinking the way we conduct ourselves and our businesses and our life. Of course, we need more robust supply chains. We need to look at what's best for us as a planet, as a species, and as the whole of humanity, rather than just being focused on the bottom lines of our own businesses. Next up is a panel discussion. This is what stands between you and the lunch, but I have a couple of plugins before that. If you're ready for a wake-up call, then you can actually step outside and learn about your individual carbon footprint. And that can allow you to take a pledge to bring it down. All the things that we take for granted, don't think twice about picking up groceries in a plastic bag, not thinking twice about tossing an empty water bottle into a trash can. It will bring things into perspective of how, despite your best efforts and your claims, you are unknowingly or subconsciously harming the planet. So this will give you a good reality check. Please do check it out. It's an installation right outside which allows you to know what your individual carbon footprint is. And then, of course, you can go ahead and make a pledge. It could be something as simple as walking to your nearer destinations, making sure that you have a zero waste day of the week, or sometimes maybe you can scale it up. This one is titled as he as a company secretary, Treasury, his appointment as the CEO in 2018. He brings to helm 30 years of diversified financial experience and has led the creation of a future-ready entity by emphasizing digitization, customer centricity, and investments across the energy value chain. We have with us Syed Munis Alvi. In this panel, we are also joined by Mr. Yusuf Siddiqui, who's currently serving as the Chief Executive Officer at the Engro Energy Limited. He joined the Engro Vopak and the LNG Terminal Limited as the Chief Executive Officer in April 2020. Prior to this, he has headed the Shell businesses in Tunisia and Jordan. We're very happy to have you with us, Mr. Yusuf Siddiqui. Ladies and gentlemen, the next panelist, he was appointed as the Chief Executive of the Indus Motor Company Limited in 2017. He's been with the company since 2000 and has served key roles in various departments, owing to which he's acquired rich experience in end-to-end management of company operations. He's also served as the chairman of the Pakistan Automotive Manufacturing Association. We have with us Mr. Ali Asghar Jamali. Ladies and gentlemen, we are also going to take this opportunity and welcome Ali Asghar Jamali Saab is, of course, joining us online. We'll also have the opportunity to welcome in person on stage our next panelist, who's serving as a research fellow and head of Energy Unit and Center of Sustainable Future Resources at SDPI. He has a doctorate in energy economics with more than 10 years of experience in the Pakistan energy sector. His expertise includes energy markets, energy poverty, energy transition, macro and micro level sustainable future resources, carbon markets, and many others. Please welcome Dr. Khalid Waleed. Our next panelist is also joining us online. He is currently serving as the Managing Director of Private Power and Infrastructure Board, which is a one-window facilitator in the government of Pakistan to implement power policies and facilitate investors in development of power generation and infrastructure projects under long-term agreements. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on this panel Mr. Shah Jahan Mirza. And you might have noticed the air quality in this hall is also sort of tanked. That's your barbecue lunch, which is getting prepared. So it's going to be double an effort to sort of focus on the conversation on clean energy with barbecue in the room. But nonetheless, I am going to attempt that. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for making time for us today.
And I know my online panelist is with us, but let me begin with the panel right here. Fahad, if I may, take this one to you. We often hear of the term power wheeling, and do you think the power wheeling reforms can actually contribute in, paving a way for clean energy mix to be implemented much faster in Pakistan? What's your opinion about that?
Thank you. Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you, Sidra. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great opportunity because, and the experts are sitting right next to me, but fundamentally, if there is a power wheeling opportunity and there's a buyer and there's a seller, the buyer will look to buy the most efficient energy at the lowest price, ideally. And for that, renewables is critical because it helps reduce the cost of energy. Unfortunately, speaking from a business perspective, I think leadership of organizations in Pakistan spend a disproportionate amount of time looking and trying to deal with energy issues, and often also end up tying up capital into captive energy, whereas the opportunity cost is that capital could be used in other opportunities for business extension and so on. So if we had an efficient market, that would certainly create an opportunity. The challenge there, unfortunately, is that, and we've explored this quite closely, is that there is a desire, but that I believe the regulation may not be as mature as it needs to be. And the transmission and distribution network in Pakistan at this point in time wouldn't support a genuine rollout to CTBCM, in addition to which, all the utilities need to be aligned as well. So if I am based, suppose, in Hyderabad and I want to buy energy from Engro or K Electric, I still need to operate through HESCO system, and I would need them to also buy into that. So I think there are a couple of challenges that exist currently, but it's a great opportunity for renewables within Pakistan.
But this sounds like a lot of roadblocks and bottlenecks. What's your suggestion? How do we take these away?
I think it's a pretty loaded question, but I definitely feel that privatization of the discos would be one way to create that sort of approach in terms of understanding the value proposition. Right now, if you have monopolies, if you have bureaucracies that are sort of so well entrenched, and if I as a business need to go to HESCO to ask them for an NOC if I want to buy energy from K Electric or Engro, then that's never going to happen unless they are sort of incentivized to be efficient. And I think with these quasi-government approach in terms of the way discos are currently run, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Right. Right. And I think we see a taste of that in the news and the discourse that surrounds all of the electricity provided, not just K-Electric. But Munas, I do want to drive the point that this seems to be a universal problem at this point in time. Of course, the conflict has added to it. The COVID pressed upon a different range of logistics and supply issues that further burdened the energy industry. But in UK as well, people have been talking about the eating versus heating problem. In Pakistan, we have our own economic turmoil. People are usually, and I'm probably guilty to that as well on media, we simply keep talking about when the benefit of it will be passed on to the consumer. When will we have lower electricity bills? So in that entire range of pressure, where does clean energy come into the mix and into their ideologies?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Sidra, for, I think it's a very important question. And people obviously feels that if you add a lot of renewable, then probably the tariff will go down. I would, there is a slight myth in it, although obviously it is much cheaper. But if we talk about an overall generation mix where you have renewables not only limited to solar or wind, if you have hydro also included in it, then probably you can say that you have some kind of a base load, and then the cost of the entire generation mix will go down. The other problem is that, we've always thought that solar is going to be very cheap, but now, you have seen that in Pakistan, they tried to attract investors at a tariff of 3.4 cents, and no one was interested, and now they are rebidding it with no benchmark tariff. Probably the expectation is that probably we'll get something very close to 5 cents. And if you look at 5 cents, and by the time it will come, probably it is going to be close to 16, 17 rupees, if not more at that point in time. They are bidding today, probably it will take another at least 2 years, maybe, by the time you will have the crystallization of this decision into actual supply of power. The cost of electricity, at the end of the day is dependent on many factors. And in Pakistan, particularly because of the excess capacity right now as we have, which is being allocated on people who are using it. So that cost is there. But at the end of the day, something which probably a little different to what we are discussing right now, but if you want to understand why the electricity tariffs have to be higher, is because of the fact that the government does not have the ability to finance the excess capacity not being burdened on the customers. And why is that? Is because unfortunately people are not paying taxes to the level they should be paying. And when the government does not have that funding available, they have no other option but to charge the entire cost to the customers. And at the end of the day, when you look at the overall mix of customers, I don't know, most of us might not be knowing this, but around 60% of the customers are protected customers, which means that they are consuming 200 units or less. And their tariff even today is around 9 rupees. Your ability to burden them more is very limited. So what you have to do is to pass the entire increase to the remaining customers, which are very little. So if you increase the propensity to pay of that customer, of that citizen of Pakistan, by whether it is employment, whether it is increase in his income, and then you can pass on some increase to those customers also, it will benefit the overall basket to be less irrational in terms of the people who are not in that pool. And if the government is collecting the right amount of taxes, probably then they will be in a position to subsidize to some extent, to the extent at least it is not because of any other event but lack of growth, which is crystallizing in unutilized power, which ultimately is being charged.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, we have been witnessing it, that when the government imposed a 6,000 rupee tax per month on a shop which is not registered. The emphasis is on that they were not registered. Asking to pay 200 rupee per day tax who is operating a shop, they agitated and that tax was withdrawn. So if you are running a company and you have sources and you cannot tap onto all those sources, ultimately the cost has to be allocated in some form or the other.
It's very
So
interesting.
it is inadvertently electricity tariff which is being
It's very
higher.
interesting. What you've mentioned over here is that all our policy responses or interventions have been more driven by the economic benefits of it or the fiscal benefits of it, to be more particular. When we are striving to collect perhaps more taxes, to increase the revenue base, it is less about how clean and how clean and green this mix is going to be. But I hope I get a chance to circle back to it. And just on that note, Yusuf Saab, Pakistan currently pledges to have 60% of electricity from clean sources, and we particularly pointed out hydro. I was recently at another big banks event that was again making pledges about sustainability, and they also pointed out that eventually they want to phase out all financing for coal-related projects. We've suddenly made coal the bad guy here. What's your take on it, and how do you think Pakistan is going to move towards that mix?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So let's first understand how enormous the problem is, and then I'll give a solution, which in our opinion is a way to go. So currently the world has a population hovering around 8 billion people. It will touch around 10 billion in 2050, and it will touch about 12 billion in 2080. The world needs energy. And there is no scenario that is created by any university, any organization, or any company which says that the energy consumption will go down. Absolutely none. So for humanity to progress, energy is the lifeline of any progress globally. Now, keep that in mind and come to the Pakistan level. Now, in Pakistan, as was earlier mentioned, most vulnerable country, and we only contribute 0.5 to 0.7% of the global emissions. So again, the paradox that Amir was talking about. So how do we ensure that our people, 250 million of us, 70% live in the villages, 30% live in the city. We know by 2050, it would be reverse. 70% will live in the cities. They will like to drive motorcycles, cars, they will like to fly. How do we progress? But we progress in a responsible way so that we are at net zero. So sitting today, we can make the government a bogey person, it's not doing A, it's not doing B, it's not doing C. We should do that, absolutely. Government has a huge role to play in this whole progress journey. But again, governments in Pakistan, elsewhere, tend to be slow. There's a big super tanker. It's not going to move at a speed that the world is changing. So the private sector, in Engro's opinion, has to take the lead. Absolutely 100%. Now, how does it take the lead? Now, that's where the solution part comes in. And we have done a lot of work on what to do with OICCI, with PBC. So a lot of work has been done. So what my opinion, sitting today, what is the Pakistan's energy challenge? The number one energy challenge in Pakistan is that since 1947, there is only a single buyer model implemented in this country to buy electricity and to buy gas. Since 1947, or even below, after that. That monopoly has to break. I am very cognizant that the DISCOs, CPPA, companies like KE, for example, they are in a bind. It's not easy to break that monopoly in a way that they also stay profitable. But the thing has to start somewhere. So our proposal is that we already have, the government has to play a part here. What Fahad just said, CTBCM, a law that has been passed last year, has not been implemented since last 1.5 years, needs to be implemented responsibly. as I said, I'm very cognizant of the discourse going into the red because they are used to subsidies and others. But let's start with only new projects, green projects that come in, allow them to do bilateral trade. So companies like Fahad's company or somebody else's company can directly deal in power. Not all, not legacy. Then you move on to gas. SNGPL and SSGC have a monopoly to transport and distribute gas.
Yeah.
You break that monopoly, you go in. So in my opinion, today this is the way to go. And that will put us a journey which will then automatically translate into low emissions
But just
energy.
a short lead question to that. We were just listening to Bill Winters talking about how going green, being mindful about emissions is also great for business. Right now, we often debate about subsidies in isolation. Even the energy subsidies that are given with the mindset that, okay, we'll have production, the exports are going to earn more forex for the country. When the forex gets parked out of the country and never comes in, is there a different lens we need to take when we are giving these energy subsidies?
So see, the solution that I'm saying, CTBCM and the third-party access for gas, there is no subsidy involved. So it will be, for example, Engro building a green park, selling it to Fahad. Fahad will only buy for me if I am able to be competitive to the grid. If I'm expensive to the grid, he won't buy. Simple as that. Same for gas. Any company imports gas, LNG at its own risk. It comes and sells to, for example, my fellow Engro Polymer. Engro Polymer will only buy gas for their industrial use if it is cheaper than what they are getting from the grid, current grid. So unless and until we don't go on that path, zero subsidy, let the private sector come in, protect the poor, protect the segments that need protection, but you go on that journey. But why we are not going on that journey? It's not that solutions are not known. The monopolies by nature don't like to be broken. So go slow. Go only for the new projects first. Let the new, brand new
Yusuf
projects
Saab,
come in and then go back.
I think we'll build up on that. Mona Saab, you want to make a quick comment before we move on?
While we have filed for KE again has been considered to be a monopoly, but for abundant clarity, we have filed a non-exclusive tariff.
Huh.
But again, what my colleague is saying is not that simple. You know, when you talk to people in Islamabad, they have very different picture of CTBCM. So let's not debate on
So
CTBCM
let's take it to
here.
Islamabad. Let's go to the virtually connected panelists. I'm wondering if Shahjahan Mirza Saab can listen to us. Sir, are we audible to you?
Yes, you are audible.
So wonderful. I'd like to bring you into this conversation as well, and what institutions are doing and what is the kind of role that they are playing to support renewable energy financing in Pakistan. Are there any policy reforms that are needed? I've seen a number of people complain about the development model. A lot of these are great ideas, but by the time we can put them in action, a lot of valuable time has already passed. So can you tell us a little bit about what's happening right now?
Thank you, Sidra. I think Monas and Yusuf has touched upon very critical points. I think it's always difficult to defend the government side when the four private sector geniuses are sitting in the panel. But again, I'll try. I think to one extent on which I fully agree with Yusuf and the others that probably the solution is opening up the market. We are delayed in setting up and establishing renewable energy project. I don't have any hesitation to admit that. What are the reasons? I think that will be a long debate, so I'm not opening it up. But coming back to the question, I think what government is now trying to do for the last couple of years, they are putting more and more emphasis on the renewable energy. As Monas mentioned, we have set a target of 60% renewable energy, including hydro by 2031. Which is a huge target actually. I mean, it's easy to say 60%, taking from 31% to 60%. But when we look at the number, we're roughly talking about $50+ billion investment in OPEX and in the capital cost for bringing in this kind of renewable energy into the grid. And you have rightly pointed out that financing of these targets is one of the biggest challenge. Apart from this generation side, probably we need maybe 50% of that in terms of improving the grid system and the transmission system of the country, which is very old and requires a lot of work actually to absorb the intermittency and variability of the renewable energy. So these are the challenges in front of us. And on top of that, I think the biggest challenge we are facing is the country economic conditions and the credit rating. We have from the PPIB forum, we have advertised a 600 megawatt solar PV project in Punjab province called Addu. And last time it was not successful because the NAPRA put a cap of 3.41 cents and reverse options were required. So nobody actually thought that that tariff is feasible and financeable. This time we have opened this ceiling and we're saying that let's see what is the market price for this kind of investment. So we are just starting and we need to do a lot of work. What I always say on every forum, that for Pakistan so far we have not been marketing the Pakistan Green Energy and Renewable Energy Initiative at a level where it should have been. The reality of the life is that if we go to the market for financing a coal power project, we get LIBOR or SOFR plus 4.5, 4.75%, and all our renewable energy projects. We have about 18 wind projects, 6 solar projects in operation now. All of them have been financed at the same financing rate which is available to the coal and the gas project. So that is the area I think where we need to work a lot.
If I may just interject, you've highlighted a wide range of challenges. Can I just add to that you know the government, you rightly said that we're just getting started and who's going to drive this seat. My question is, who do we hold responsible and accountable when it comes to the policy making? I mean, first and foremost, we are going to be, soon going to have elections, fingers crossed. And वहाँ पे बात हो रही होती है सस्ता पेट्रोल, कम बिजली का bill. Nobody is really taking into account the clean, green, initiatives that we're talking about. The last time we heard about this, there was an e-vehicle, policy that was coming through. But everything just keeps hanging in the air. And every new person who takes over the office points to us a variety of problems and how complex the problem is.
I think you are absolutely right. As I said, we are delayed and probably there are many factors responsible. And I think it's very difficult to criticize government policy sitting at this position. But still, I say that with the consensus of the 4 provinces, we made a policy in 2019, which is the renewable energy policy. We set this 60% target in that policy. But in my opinion, that policy is not practically implementable. There are many lacunas in that policy, which so far we have not been able to correct. And not to blame anyone, but I think that's because we are a federation. So we have to take the provinces along with us. So we have been trying to do more and more bidding, but sometimes one province, sometimes the other province becomes sort of a barrier in that because they think this is our right. Under the 18th Constitution Amendment, under the 2019 RE policy, they have the right to do that.
Absolutely.
So to actually resolve this issue, last year we got approval of the framework solar guidelines from the federal cabinet and we are working on that. But at the same time, we are trying to resolve those issues. But as I said earlier, and you rightly point out, for time being, the biggest challenge is to bring financing for these projects in Pakistan, on which we are working. And we have tried to give the best security package which we can under these circumstances. And we'll continue working on that. And that we are working with the RELF, which is an NGO. We are working with the World Bank. We're trying to look at the potential of the Balochistan also. But all these things are obviously going to take some time before actually these start coming on ground.
Bilkul sahi. And as I, just slightly mentioned about the e-vehicle policy, I want to build up on that. Just like many other countries around the world, Pakistan has also put a target of 30% sales of electric vehicles by 2030. Ali, if I can bring this one to you. Ali, am I audible to you?
Yes, Sidra, you're
So मुझे ये बताइए कि 30% by 2030, obviously a very, very ambitious target. What do you think Pakistan's current major challenges in this regard would be? कराची में तो हमारी ऐसी किस्मत है, हमारा बिजली का बिल ज़्यादा आता है, हम solar panels लगाते हैं, धूप आनी बंद हो जाती है. We've had a very cloudy summers, so I don't know what to do about that.
अल्लाह करे और बादल निकले.
So, Ali, what do you think? E-vehicles.
Okay, I think, thank you, Sidra, and I hope I'm audible.
You are.
I think first of all, I think the stage is well set for me to answer this question. I think all my colleagues have dwelled on it. So I think, first of all, the government has given a very good and progressive auto policy. So I think they have given a policy where it's covered hybrid electric vehicle, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and also the electric vehicle. So I think the government job is done. The auto industry is now working on it. The only concern here is, as we see in Pakistan, our policies are only for 3 years and 5 years, and by the end, people do investment, the policies end. Now, when we come to the electric vehicle, so the policy that the government has given ends on 2026, just to let Mr. Shahjahan know, and our target is 2030 for 30% vehicles. So it's not aligned. The policy and the target is not aligned, but I am sure the government will extend this policy. Based on that policy, we've already seen that hybrid electric vehicles have started coming, and a lot of people are working on electric vehicles. The issue, from my side, I feel that for Pakistan, I think the first step would be hybrid electric and plug-in electric, and then we move to the electric vehicles. Primary, the reason is what I think we've been talking about is the energy mix. When you see from the climate point of view, I think if we have electric vehicles, from the climate point of view, it will not make any difference. Right now, our energy mix, 62% is from fossil fuel and 38% is renewable, which includes hydro, solar, and nuclear. The countries which have benefited from electric vehicle on emissions has been where their ratio is 80-20. So when we'll have an electric vehicle and we're going to import coal and fuel and gas and burn it and produce energy, the emissions will not go down. So that's the one side of it. So I think the good part is that people have started bringing hybrid electric vehicles that are going to come in. I think by 2030, your mix will be at 30%. But the bigger challenge that comes in is our scrapping policy. While the government has given a very good policy, what missing part is in every other country, there's a scrapping policy. So we can see, as you said, in Karachi, you will see the Mazda buses, which are 30 years old, okay, which vehicles are putting so much of emission in the atmosphere. That's what the challenge is. And I think there is where the government has to come up with a scrapping policy, which India has, Bangladesh has, even Sri Lanka has, all other countries have a scrapping policy. I think that would make a lot of big difference on the environment.
Absolutely, and they're already working towards that. They say that when a city's population surpasses 10 million mark is when you should have a robust mass transit infrastructure already in place. Unfortunately for Pakistan, that's not true. We're still at a stage that if we get 4 or 5 buses, we kind of celebrate that. We wait for years for that to happen, and the cars never retired. Every year, we have this brilliant Chamakpatti wala that will, they will paint a new number as soon as it's December, that this make is now 2023, whereas the car was actually manufactured maybe 30 years ago. So I want to bring this one to Dr. Khalid. I think we haven't touched upon the coal power fleet. And what challenges and opportunities do you see if we are looking at an early retirement for them? Nothing retires in Pakistan. We always have a second life. What do you think about the coal powers?
Thank you so much, Sidra, tabling this very important question. Well, I represent SDPI, and I love these letters. I mean, SDPI, not just that I work here, but these letters represent very core message for the Pakistan's multifaceted crisis. Like S represents sustainability. Right now in Pakistan, there is an unsustainable energy mix. 40% comes from firewood, actually. If we bring that integrated energy sort of thing here, the total energy mix of Pakistan, then there is development, and development is linked with growth in fossil fuel, and it is coupled with fossil fuel energy. And then policies, there are inconsistent policies, there are policies, and I, which is for STPI is institute, but I represents the integration and inclusiveness in Pakistan, which I mean is the way forward for Pakistan if we want to have inclusive and integrated sort of development. Well, what does integration mean? Currently, Pakistan is facing a multifaceted crisis in terms of economy, in terms of energy, and in terms of environment. I call it as 3 E's of Pakistan. How we can solve this crisis by formulating an integrated and inclusive policy. And I think the emissions, the policy around emissions would be the linchpin for that sustainable development, because if we want to make our energy sector self-sufficient and I would say efficient, we need to go towards sustainable energy mix, and that is that we look for the options those are economically viable and sustainable for energy and good for environment as well. And one of the key option is the early retirement of coal power plants, because there is immense level of climate financing available in the world horizon on the global landscape. One of the example is the JETP. Mr. Winters also mentioned that. Just Energy Transition Partnerships. In case of South Africa, they pledged for 80 billion USDs and they received 8 billion USD so that they can early retire their coal fleet. So we need to have these integrated sort of policies where energy, sustainable energy and environmental policies are macroeconomic policies
any key
as well.
roadblocks that you see in the way? There are lots and lots of global pledges that are usually made, and also for Pakistan as well after June 2022. What seems to be the problem in them coming through?
Well, first problem is that we need to have this integrated planning going on, because lots and lots of focus of planning in terms of energy is on the power sector. We need to bring other energy sectors to the broader policy making fold as well. For example, transportation sector, for example, residential sector in terms of cooking fuels. Just to give you an example, the residential sector is the highest energy consumer in Pakistan. We need to bring efficiency debate to that as well, because Just Energy Transition Partnership and planning is not just about the power sector, it is about the whole energy sector as well. So we need integrated planning. Just to give you an example where energy, environment and economy can integrate, if we, there are, I would say, according to Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, 1 billion USD is our import toll monthly for our petroleum products. If we just save 30% of it, that would be 3 million USD per month. Annually, that would be 3.6 billion USD per year, which is exactly equal to that SBA program given by IMF. So if we save 30% from our transportation sector, that would be equivalent to IMF program. We would be solving our energy crisis,
Right.
we would be solving our economic crisis,
Absolutely.
and as well as
So
our
when it
environmental
comes to
crisis.
innovative ideas and policy interventions, efficiencies need to be built into it, and that's what is going to make the whole system sustainable. So that fiscal end of it cannot be ignored. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for my panel, covering, of course, green energy and emissions. May I request the gentlemen to please come together for a photograph. Shahjahan Saab, Ali Asghar Saab, बहुत-बहुत शुक्रिया आपकी भी मौजूदगी का.
Thank you. Thank you, Ji. Thank you.
Thank you, Ji. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. And as promised, we have some food for thought for all of you. Our next speaker is a prolific speaker, and congratulations was due since the last time I interacted with him. He's now been, announced as the president of the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the WWF, and is the Dean Emeritus and the professor at the Pardee School of Global Studies at Boston University. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear a wonderful message which is very pertinent, very timely, and this is by Dr. Adil Najam, the president of WWF, and let's pay heed to this, and then this is going to wind up the first segment, the first part of the Pakistan Climate Conference. Let's take a look.
Greetings and Assalamu alaikum. It is a great pleasure to be with you. I am honored and I am delighted to be able to speak to this important gathering and this important conference. I'm only sorry that I cannot be with you in person. I would have loved to have been able to do that, and my apologies for not being there in person. I wish you all and everyone at this conference the very, very best, and I congratulate all the organizers. I congratulate especially because this is an important time to be talking about this. We look around the world and it seems in every dimension, whether it's politics, whether it's society, whether it is economics, whether it is certainly climate, it seems that the planet is at war with itself. That we, the human species, at a time when we have more food, when we have more wealth, when we have more knowledge, when we have more technology, when we have better medicine, when we have better communication than ever before in history, at that very time, we have lost our senses. And that is a terrible feeling, but it is also a time when we need to think about the big issues of our time. And clearly, global climate change is one of those existential issues. I want to use this time to throw out two ideas. One is about where are we? Where are we in terms of time? And second is about how to think about green financing or climate finance. And I know better people than me have and will be talking about it, who have much more expertise, but let me throw out some big ideas about these two topics. The first thing, where are we? I believe and have been arguing for 10 years that we are in what I call the age of adaptation. And in climate terms, what that means is, I know all of you understand this, but very briefly, there are these two concepts. One is called mitigation or mitigation policy. The other is called adaptation or adaptation policy. Mitigation is what do you do to keep a problem from happening. In the climate case, what that means is you try to manage carbon. You try to reduce your carbon footprint. You try to reduce your carbon emissions so that the problem doesn't happen. Adaptation is what do you do if you can't mitigate in time? How do you deal with the impacts? How do you adapt to the impacts of those problems? That's adaptation policy. How do you adapt to the floods? How do you adapt to the drought? How do you adapt to the heat? And so on and so forth. We are now at a place because we did fail to mitigate, right? Or mitigate enough in time. And because of that, we now have to face the impacts and therefore adapt. In that sense, adaptation is the failure of mitigation, but it is not the opposite of mitigation. And what I mean by that is that just because you have to adapt, you cannot not mitigate. In fact, you have to mitigate even faster, mitigate even more, because the less you mitigate, the more the impacts will be, the more you will have to adapt, the more that will cost. Right? So that's the umbrella world we are in. The other part about the world we are in is that especially this last couple of years, especially this year, especially the September we've been through, especially the summer we've been through, has left a lot of people who are doing the science very, very worried. It turns out that we may actually have been slightly wrong. Not wrong in understanding what climate change was, but many of our projections of how things will happen, how they will unfold, turned out to be much too conservative. That things are unfolding much faster, things are happening much faster, the change is happening at a much greater level. We saw this in the September we happened, which was totally out of the ballpark. We saw it in the records that were being broken in the summer, when every day you would see a new record for the hottest day. Now, some of that is certainly El Nino and so on and so forth, but clearly climate change as a phenomena is kicking in and is taking the climate system and making it berserk. This is not the time to go into it, but that is the world that you, as people who care about the economy, as people who work in businesses, as people who think about enterprises, have to realize is the world you are living in. That is now a ground reality. And therefore, you also have to think of a world where this may and nearly certainly will exacerbate, without us knowing how it will exacerbate. Right? And that brings us to this question that I know you've been talking about, I assume you will continue talking about, which is green financing or climate finance. And again, I don't want to go into the specifics. Better people than me will do that. I do think, and I say this as a Pakistani more than anything else, I think there are at least 4 ways in which you can think about this notion of green or climate financing. One, I would say, is what is a dangerous way. The second is what I would say is a wrong way. The third is what I would call the right way. And the fourth is what I would call the good way. So here are my 4 ways to think about green financing, or how I see people thinking about it, particularly in context of developing countries like Pakistan. Let me start actually with the wrong way. Okay. And the wrong way to think about green financing is to think about it as a fad, to think about it as cheap or no-cost money. To think about it, okay, the world is suddenly, these big countries, rich people, so on and so forth, are concerned about climate. So maybe there is some finance sitting somewhere, some grants, some international funds, and maybe we can, by playing victim and highlighting our own vulnerabilities to climate, but also how little we have contributed to it, so on and so forth, maybe there is this new pot of money somewhere. Whether it is with financial institutions, whether it is with international agreements, whether it is with aid agencies, etc., etc. And somehow, if it is there, if they're creating it, then let me try to get my share of it. I'm being totally blunt, but I do think that is one way people think about it. And if you do, I sympathize, but I also pity you, because A, that is not true, and B, more importantly, even if it were, it is very clear that it is not very easy to get it by that way of thinking. And that is one of the reasons why you can see that climate finance, to the extent that it is there, which is fairly small, goes to particular places that are ready, places that think more seriously about it, places that connect the right dots, so on and so forth. So that's one way. I think the wrong way. I am hoping, assuming no one in this room thinks about it this way. So let me move on. There is a dangerous way to think about it. The dangerous way is not just wrong in the assumptions that I said, but the dangerous way still looks at climate finance as relatively cheap money, but in a slightly more sophisticated way, which is to say, and some of it has been structured like this, that this is particularly true, for example, for carbon trading, carbon credits, etc., that carbon is cheaper in some places, that reduction in carbon can be cheaper in some places. That's the logic. The logic makes sense. And it is more expensive in other places. Therefore, places where it is expensive, or companies for whom it is expensive, will pay the places where it is cheaper to buy their carbon credits. Someone will pay me to reduce my carbon, take my credit, and it is now there. And the reason I say it is dangerous, it's not always dangerous. That's the logic, and it works when it works. But we are now realizing that very often it doesn't work. It doesn't work in many, many ways. It doesn't work because it is not as cheap as we often thought. Those transactions aren't as clear as we often thought. The financial system of that exchange, that transaction, isn't as easy as we often thought. But let me say why it is dangerous in a Pakistani context. If I am right in the world I am describing, then developing countries, companies in developing countries, countries like Pakistan will themselves have to, maybe by requirement of law, reduce their carbon. And if we have sold our carbon assets for cheap already, then the question will be, where lies the ownership of this global ability? And whether we've sold it too cheap, too early, rather than doing it for better reasons. Now, this is a complex argument, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but I want to put it in the mind that if we are going to turn carbon into a commodity, then let us at least price it right? And we can fall into that trap of having priced it wrong and sold the asset, if you will, not that it is really an asset, too early, at the wrong time, at the wrong price, to the wrong people, or the wrong place, and so on and so forth. So I just put that thought out here. I know it's a controversial one, but bear with me. The third thing, I think, is the right way to think about it. And the right way to think about it, I think, begins with an understanding that I want to do this for my own good. That I have a business case to myself that impels me to climate action, whether it is in reduction of my emissions or in some form of adaptation. And I have to first make that business case to myself, that I am doing this not simply because suddenly there's a new commodity that I hadn't thought of, or a new pot that I hadn't thought of, but because there is an actual need, a business case for myself. And that is where I start for. And to fulfill that business case, I'm going to go now and figure out where the financing exists. And finally, there is the good way. And by good way, what I mean is that it is the right way in that it starts with a business case for myself. But it is good in that the business case is not only for what I need today. There's an energy crisis and I need to move to non-fossil fuel or renewables because they are more reliable, right? That's a business case. That's a very good business case for Pakistan. In fact, more and more businesses should be doing this, not just for carbon, but for energy reasons. But the good way is to understand that age of adaptation that I was thinking about and to make the business case for myself and my society and my country in a larger, longer-term perspective. To understand that climate investments today are investments in the future, are investments for that age of adaptation that we have to be ready for, that it is in fact an advancement, just the same way as we do in technology. When you see a technology changing, in some ways, this is the type of investment and green financing that we should be thinking about and should be seeking. And there, the financing can come from multiple places. The financing has to come not only from outside sources, the financing can come from inside sources, but if it starts with a business case, then it is the right way to think about it. If it starts from a business case in this long-term perspective, then it is long-term for the enterprise, but also for the society. Then I believe it is a good case. Thank you for having me. I know I have spoken like a professor, but if you call a professor, which is what I'm speaking as, that is what you would get. I realize the points I've thrown are big. Some of them may be controversial, but I hope that they instigate a conversation. And I wish you well. I am unable to connect with you personally this time, but I look forward to connecting with many people in the room and keeping these conversations alive. Thank you very much.
That was Dr. Adil Najam, and ladies and gentlemen, since he was speaking about the aid of adaptation, I will be happy to report back to him that we've all adapted and we'll have a much shorter lunch break now. I am requesting you all to be back by 2 o'clock. It's a short break, bio break, stretch break, however you'd like to term it, but we'd love for you to come back for our exciting lineup and a brilliant set of speakers right here back at 2 o'clock. So enjoy your lunch and we'll see you back here shortly.